Good, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to the latest episode of the Hard Compound Live. For those of you who don't know, my name is Rich and I run and operate the Hard Compound. We are a one-stop shop for all things motorsport, from F1 to IndyCar, touring cars to rallying bikes as well, and anything else you take a stick at. We also, we do this in the form of race reviews, race previews, any new liveries, any breaking news, throwbacks, birthday posts, and just pictures of our favourite cars and bikes from down the years, really. My apologies that we're a bit late this evening. Slight connection issues across the Atlantic, but we are all good now, so my apologies. We do these live interviews on Facebook, Twitter, and our YouTube channel, so do give us a follow on all of those platforms. We're also on Instagram for all those posts that I mentioned previously, and we put 2 or 3 out every day, so do come and give us a follow. We've had some fantastic guests on these live interviews. As I said, these are on Facebook, Twitter, and our YouTube. They're saved in the video section on Facebook and in the live section on our YouTube channel. Just to give you a very brief taste of some of the guests that we've had the honour and the privilege of speaking with Mr. Mario Andretti and with Jackie X. And we've spoken to a number of drivers from various series down the years, the likes of just recently we spoke Catherine Legg, who's running in the Indy 500 this year. We've also spoken with the likes of Mr. Karen Chandhok. We've had Mika Salo, Mark Sura, Emanuele Pero, Brian Herter, Scott Pruitt, Alex Palou, Alonso Jr., Ari Leyendijk, Danny Sullivan. We spoke with Nicholas Prost, Carl Wendlinger. We spoke with Jason Plato, Steve Soper, Gabriele Tarquini, Ivan Muller, Fabrizio Giovanardi, Andy Prea, many others. So do check those out on our Facebook and our YouTube. But we have a fantastic live guest for you waiting right now, so I'm going to stop my rambling very shortly. He's raced in Formula One, unfortunately a time that was characterised by unreliable machinery and some bad luck, basically. He's also raced in IndyCar, Formula 3000, Formula 3, Formula Ford. He's raced at Daytona. He's raced everything, and he's an absolute legend. So please join me in extending a very, very warm welcome to that legend, Mr. Roberto Moreno.
How are you?
And here we are. I'm very well, Roberto. How are you?
Well, thanks very much.
Good. Yes, obviously we got the technical issues ironed out, which is good, and it's great to see you. Thank you very, very much for coming on and having a chat.
It must have been the conflict of sunny weather over here and rainy over there.
Yeah,
if I'm not wrong.
Somewhere over the Atlantic, it all crashed and burned, and yeah. But no, but we're all good. I'm sure the weather is much nicer there than it is here. It's raining and wet and horrible. So, but yeah, thank you for coming in out of the sun for us.
No worries. I just for the records, I love England. England was where everything started for me in racing after my karting times in Brazil. And because the friends I made and the people that helped me, I was able to be very lucky, contrary to what you believe, to, without any money, make my way all the way up to Formula One and eventually to IndyCars. Or let's say to IndyCars, Formula One, and back to IndyCars. So yeah. I've been very fortunate to be able to achieve all that with not much at all, just with friends helping me.
Which is absolutely fantastic. So obviously we know that motorsport's not cheap, and it never will be. It never has been. And if you can get to the top, thanks to obviously having the ability and having good people around you, then it shows it can be done, which is fantastic. And we're obviously going to touch more on that very soon. Just very quickly, I want to say hello to the folks in the comment section. You guys have already tuned in already. If you have any questions, do pop them in to the comment section and we'll try and work them in as best we can. But I suppose we have to start right at the very start, back in Brazil. How did you first become interested in the world of motorsport?
Well, when I was 11, I was born in Rio, just across the street from the beach, Copacabana at the time. My father worked for the one of the Brazilian banks, and uh, they've this president decided to build a capital in the middle of nowhere. So we did the same distance for everybody to travel to, senators and House of Parliament, and they all used to travel the same distance. So he decided to to move the capital from Rio to Brasilia, where travel, and we'll start this new, which is the same idea as Canberra in Australia. They built a lake, they built everything, they planned everything before it was even built. And luckily, they built the streets before they built the houses or apartments. So because the thing was well designed and well planned, you know, here you're going to have the workshops, here you're going to have the buildings, here you're going to have the parliament, here you're going to have the houses. Everything was planned before it was built. So everything was really divided. And they decided to build the streets before anything. So Brasilia was built without cross junctions and without traffic lights. Under, around, and then you go to the top. The whole city was built like that.
Wow.
So I got there. I said to my father, you know, I'm only 11 or almost 12, but I said to him, look, you took me away from the beach. There's no cars here. There's nothing to do in this place. I need a little moped or motorbike to go here to move around. So a little persuasion, I was able to convince him to buy me a motorcycle. So initially I bought a moped and then a motorcycle. It was the Mini Enduro. I have one right next to me here, which is
Oh wow.
yeah, it's on my dining room. It's the
Beautiful.
bike that everything started. The reason why I got involved in racing is this little motorcycle here, which is the first. It's called the Yamaha Mini Enduro, 50cc 4 speed, and I had days when I was 11, 12. So I used to like just putting it apart and try to build again. Not very often I was able to put it back together. So I go to the shop and I ask the mechanic, you know, what should I do here? And he would show me. I would go back home, fix it, go back to him, show how it was done, and he would applaud me, or he would show me a little better way of doing it. And that became a custom. So we became friends. And after school in the mornings, on my way home, I used to go stop at the shop, which was the only shop in Brazil, in Brasilia, capital of Brazil then, that sells motorcycles, go-karts, and road cars,
Right.
mostly VW Beetles at the time. Anyway, this guy became, he was 7 years older than me, but he was so pleased that I was able to follow his directions and do it right, that he kept teaching me more and more. Every time I come from school and I stopped at the shop, he would make me working one of the motorbikes there, to a point that I knew so much from him that he started to let me take his place while he
Right.
moved into tuning cars.
Wow.
This guy happens to be Nelson Piquet.
Who?
So yeah. So,
Wow.
well, eventually he became three-time world champion. But
Yeah, of
he,
course.
some people might not know that are watching now because of the age. But Nelson was 7 years older than me, and he started to teach me, and he liked the way I was so curious about that. Became second nature to me to follow him. You know, I remember when he went to England to race Formula 3s, I used to find a school that was closed on Sunday, and I find the telephone box outside of the school, telephone to the line, and I would call Nelson in England just to chat to see how the racing went. So that's how I got to know about racing. Nelson went go-karting, and he took me with him. So he did a couple of races before he went Super V racing around Brazil, and I continued racing go-karts, and then I was hooked to it. And I did a few, so a phenomenal place that you could race on the streets in motorbikes and cars and never get caught because the police would leave you alone, because we all sons of somebody related to the government, because the only people in Brasilia at that time were people related to the government.
Right, right.
So police would not put a kid in jail that could be the son of a minister or the son of a vice president or something like that, because we all, the people that could have motorbikes. My father was the guy that had less money amongst all of them because he worked at the bank. But the kids that got involved were all high up society people, and we all played together. We used to go in the outside of the parliament on the grass, and with the motorbikes on the grass until the police would come, and then we would run away. So that was Brasilia for you. So we all grew up with racing mentality and between motorbikes and cars. I happen to like motorbikes better than cars, but because of the go-karts, one day in 1976, I won the Brazilian go-kart championship. 2 or 3 weeks later, March 28th, 76, I had a motorcycle accident in one of the local races. And I broke my ankle not knowing. I stood up, and the bone went outside of the skin. And it took me 2 years because I stood up without knowing that my foot was broken. So when you twisted the bone that was all spiky, it just broke the skin and came out. And that was 1 year of hospital every day for a full year. Anyway, when I was getting better and I was starting to think about racing in Brazil, racing cars in Brazil, Nelson comes back from England, and he's now British Formula 3 champion with a contract for Brabant. So, and I explained to him that I'm now a fan and I can do things and I'm looking to race cars. He said, Roberto, you're not racing cars in Brazil. I've got all sussed out for you. I said, come on, Elsa, are you crazy? He said, no. Formula Fords in England, you can race 3 times as much racing as you can do in Brazil for the same money. And then we did some calculation. He was right. And then I said, Nelson, but you want me to go to England? I can't even speak English. And then he looked at me and said, do you need to strive? I say, no. Okay. I said, yeah, but I don't know anything in England. I don't even know how to start. Don't worry. I have a guy that worked with me in Formula 3. His name is Pee-wee. His nickname is Pee-wee, or most know as Pee-wee. His real name is Greg Siddle. And he said, Pee-wee has worked for me. He made quite a bit of money working with me. I told him about you. He's going to sell your things that you need. He's going to make all your entries in the racing, and the only thing is you're going to do it all yourself. So that's not a problem. That doesn't scare me, but somebody to guide me. Say, Pee Wee will do that for free. I said, Nelson,
Wow.
I said, what about money? I don't have any money. Oh, don't worry. I have a sponsor of mine that doesn't want to go to Formula One with me. I will present you to him, and I'm sure he will do something with you. I said, great. And then the last thing I asked him, I said, Nelson, hang on. Just let me think about this a bit. I never raced cars in my life. You asking me to leave Brazil without any experience whatsoever of the world outside of Brazil, um, uh, and race cars that I never seen. I don't even know if I can drive well. I said, look, I've seen you karting. If you can do the things you can do in karting the way you do, you can drive a Formula One car. I'm sure of that. I know it. Plus, you're so technical. If you dedicate in being a technical driver, you might be able to survive in this world because they will be needing drivers that can set up a car. So yeah, but Nelson, what about if I go to England? I don't like the food. I don't like the weather. Let's say I suck. You're not gonna suck, but let's say you don't like England or something goes wrong. You come back to Brazil after 1 year of spending in England. You had some marvelous experience in the best place in the world to go racing. You're going to learn a lot of things, and you're going to learn English. You're going to come back to Brazil with a lot more knowledge and another language. And then I look at him and say, okay, then I
Wow.
go. And that's how the decision was made for me to start my car career in England.
That's absolutely fantastic. I love it. He just, you'd only race karts, and all of a sudden you've got Nelson Piquet's just telling you to, come over. We've got a guy who'll look after you, and all you got to do is race. Wow.
The problem started when, just so you know, it would cost around $25,000 because in Brazil we always have dollars as a reference to do a full season, 30 races and 30 tests for Van Diemen as a works driver. Plus, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000 to live out of their money. Very simple, in a very simple way.
Sure.
Nelson only found me through that sponsor that he was going to introduce me to, $8,000. So I went around Brasilia and I gathered all the friends I had. And this guy that loves racing, he took me to a bank at the end of the day where everybody, all the business people would have a little coffee and chat when they take the money from their business to the bank. And he told them, all them, about my story. And he said, this kid is good and he needs our support. So he at that found, I believe, 5 friends that chipped $1,000 each for the year. So I took to England a total of $30,000 when you needed 25,000, and I lived out of that money. And I did 22 races and 22 tests with my own team. I had a little car, a VW K7TL, which was a car before the Audis. Audi bought VW and they used that car as a reference for the first Audi. And a little open trailer. Actually, there was a little cover on it, but and that's how I went racing. Pee Wee was good friends with Ron Toronac.
Yes.
And he went to Ron Toronac and said, look, is there any chance we can have Roberto use a little space on your the old shed on the exit of your factory as his workshop? And he said, he can do that if he cleans my factory every weekend. He's not racing. So we did that deal.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's how I got a free space. I bought Pee Wee bought two paraffin heaters in front of the car, one in the back, and that's how it was my workshop. A little shed, old
Wow.
shed where Toranak used to put all his old stuff. And he told me, Roberto, you can sell all this stuff and keep the money for you. So I sold a lot of chassis, aluminum things. I sold the very first ever tire warmer that Nelson had created with this guy, Pedro from Brazil. That was on that shed. It was an aluminum thing with a little fire thing in the middle with a cap on the top. And he used to put 4 tires there and warm the tires up.
Wow, that's amazing. That's incredible. I
Yeah,
had,
that was
I had no idea about the tire warmer thing. That was
that.
amazing. I mean, I was aware of the shed and the link to Ron Toranak, but wow, that's fantastic. And obviously, for those who don't know, Ron was involved with with Jack Bradman and all the other guys. So you've basically got this little workshop. You've got the little car, and you're just kind of starting out and finding your feet at this point, I guess.
Yeah. And because of my money, the little money I took was delayed until May, I believe. Pee decided that I would not do one championship. I would enter me in various championships. At the time, we had 6 good championships for Formula Fords in England. So I would learn the circuits.
Right.
So he entered me at Brands Hatch, Silverstone Club, Silverstone Grand Prix, Alton Park, Mallory Park, all the Truxton, all the places that I would need to go racing in the future to learn the circuits. But he would just point in the map where I should go, and then I would just go by myself.
Completely on your own.
Yes.
Wow.
And I couldn't speak English.
You got to read maps.
I still remember this.
And you got to read maps and everything and do it because, wow.
Yes. Yeah. I still remember this thing that I was in Nelson's house, and I used to cycle a lot when I was waiting for my money, and I was still in Nelson's house. Nelson said to me, and the good thing about Nelson was he teach me all this, okay? And then he turned around to me and said, Roberto, you can live in my house if you want. I can be your whatever you need from me, but you're not going to learn a thing, and you need to do things yourself so you can learn how to live by yourself. I said, okay, what should I do? I said, well, if I were you, I would rent a bed and breakfast near wherever you're going to live, or wherever you're going to walk in your car, and just forget about Brazilians, forget about speaking Portuguese, so you can learn English quick. So I did all that, and then he complained to me later that I would never call him. So I've learned English in 3 months. I was going to tell you about something that happened when I was still in his house. My race car was ready.
Right.
So Nelson and Pee Wee took me to the Royal factory in Huntington.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then he found me a team that only lasts for 2 races, that I would go to the races with them. Eventually, they charged so much money, I could not afford to go with them. So I went 2 races, and then I had to go and pick up my car in Huntington. So Pee Wee got me a van with a hook for the trailer, and he went around London on the 4 the North Circular,
Oh yeah.
one with me, and I was following him all the way from Claygate in Surrey, around the 406 North Circular Road to the M1. And then he said, look, exit whatever was Huntington, you get out. And I remember because I spent a couple of weeks there. So I remember from there how to get to the factory, because I used to cycle everywhere, the same way as I did when I was in Nelson's house. So I knew my way from Surrey to London in the bicycle.
Right.
So I got my car on the M1, got to Huntington, grabbed hold of my race car, came back to go to Nelson's house, and then the next day I would go with Pee-wee to the route factory, which I would start my little adventure with Ron Toranac.
Yeah.
And I drove okay, got there, got my car, drove back. Except I didn't turn off at the 406. I continue all the way to the city center.
Right on.
I got to Bank Station.
Oh wow.
Yeah, driving this van and the trailer with the race car in the back. I started to visit London. I've seen the very well. I saw the Tower Bridge. Yeah, I saw Charing Cross. I saw Buckingham Palace. I drove the whole of London in a night, and then eventually I saw a little square, and I decided, okay, I needed to find the A3 route out of London. Once I found the A3, I would know how to get home. So without being able to ask anybody, I saw a square, maybe a Sloane Square if I'm not wrong, and I started to go in each direction trying to find signs for the A3. And after three wrong directions, I eventually got right into the right direction. I found the A3 all the way to Nelson's house. And when I got there, they all laughing at me, and they had pulled that joke on me because they knew I was going to get lost. But it was all good.
Yeah. So like, welcome to London. Go and see lots of it by accident.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Driving through London with the van with the trailer as well. That's not easy.
So that year, I did what Pee-wee suggested. I think I did quite well. And one day, I was at the shed on the route factory, Nelson shows up in the Sunday, and I saw him. I was just finishing cleaning up Ron's factory, and Nelson showed up. I said, "Well, what are you doing here?" "Oh, I just came to say hi to you. You never called me." So Nelson, you told me not to. So that was very intelligent of Nelson to make me do things myself.
Yeah.
Made me grow up very quickly, especially in England. Everything has to be precise and right. So it was a great school going to England for me. I've learned a lot of things. I made great friends. I consider England my second country in a way.
Oh,
anyway,
we love to hear that. That's good.
Yeah, I tell you, it's how I feel, and the friends I made are forever there. So one day Nelson shows up and says, "When's your next race?" I said, "Oh, Silverstone Club." "Oh, Silverstone Club, I did something really clever there. I machined the inside Formula 3 wheels, more than an inch each. My car was extremely fast on the straight line. I put the car on the weight limit. I lowered everything. I put myself much lower in the car. so the car would be fast on the straight. Oh, really? Okay. So Nelson left, got that in my head somehow. And I said, how can I get my car doing all that? So I put my car on the scales and I discovered my car was like 20 pounds too heavy, something like that, crazy. Even more, I believe. I don't remember correct, but for sure was over 20 pounds.
Wow.
So I bought a motorcycle battery to, to, to replace that big racing battery. Nelson gave me some nuts that he got out of the Brabant factory. There were K nuts, I believe. You sort of they're much smaller, lighter, and then you chop all the screws past them, and you say, I've saved a kilo just in bolts and heavy nuts.
Wow.
That I took out of the car. Then I looked after doing all that work, and the car was still 8 pounds too heavy. And I looked at bodywork on the Reina that went all the way to the back. And I looked Ron Toronac's Formula 3 cars with no engine cover.
Right. Yeah.
No, the route cars in those days had no engine cover, or if they did, they never used them.
Mm.
So,
and that continued a bit later on as well, didn't it? Yeah.
I say, well, why do I have all this bodywork behind the roll bar? So I chopped it. I hacked it off, and and then in the Formula Ford cars, the wheels were steel wheels. I could not machine them like the Formula 3 wheels Nelson did. So I saw this Ford Escort from one of the mechanics working at the route factory, and had those wheels that looked like it was off-centered.
Right.
To my Formula 3 Ford wheels. And then I asked the mechanic, can I try that in my race car just to see if they fit? He said, no way. So as soon as he went for lunch, I went there, took his wheels off, put in my car. They measured about 2 inches narrower. So I put them back before I came back from lunch. And I knew if I bought 4 wheels like that, my car would be narrower. So I went to a scrap yard. And I found out I spent a day. And I took a little jig to test them. And basically, I took the suspension out of my race car, put in an aluminum plate, and I took that with me to test the wheels. And I tested and I found 4 wheels. I took the rust out of them, I painted them, but they look really ugly, extremely ugly. But they were lighter and narrower. So my car was on the weight limit now. But this car was really ugly. Okay?
Right.
So Pee-wee, that racing Silverstone club, in England, you had 6 good championships, but every so often there was a weekend, there was only one race, and everybody from all the 8 championships used to go to that race.
Right.
And guess what? That was the race. Okay. So here arrived. Pat Simmons was the designer of my car. Right. And I got on with him because I spent a couple of weeks in Huntington before. He made me babysit his kids a couple of times. And he showed up at Silverstone. And the first person he came to say hi was me. I was just arriving. And I talked to Pat a little bit, with my broken English. And I started to pull my car out of the trailer, which had a little cover on the top. When Pat looked at my car, I should have taken a picture of his face.
I'll bet.
He said, Roberto, what the fuck did you do to my car? To him, he took off, left me alone. Anyway, I, humbly did everything I had to do. I went practicing, learned the circuit quickly because there was only 3 corners. And I didn't look too bad, but I didn't know because I had nobody to time me or anything. So I got to qualified on pole in front of all the works drivers.
Wow.
The minute I qualify on pole, I stopped at the scrutineering or whatever I did. They took my car from me. I didn't see my car for a couple of hours. And what they've done is they've sealed the engine, they've sealed the gearbox, and they made sure I couldn't change anything in their car, because Ralph Furman from Van Diemen could not accept a new young guy that could, a single person team could beat his work cars.
You can understand his thinking, yeah. Yeah.
But it was the best thing that happened to me. Wow. Because after the race, I won the race. It was me and one of Ralph's driver that pulled away from everybody because we use each other's slipstream. We pulled away and I beat him in the last lap. They took my engine, they took my gearbox, proved to be legal. And Ralph made me a phone call one day he made a phone call to Pee-wee, and the person that used to translate for me was Nelson's wife. Okay. The conversation. If I had to speak to Pee-wee, I would call her, she would call Pee-wee, and vice versa. For 6 months that went on. And Ralph said to Pee-wee, said, look, it was me that complained about the car. Sorry, but if Roberto wants a Van Diemen anytime he wants. And then I say to Pee-wee, no, we need to race this car because I know this car. We need to sell the car at the end of the year to pay the bills. So I need this car to be competitive. But I want to race for Van Diemen next year. Do that deal for me. And Pee-wee called him back and said, can he race for you next year? I said, yes. And that's how the deal was done for me to be the works driver for Van Diemen.
And for those who don't know, obviously Van Diemen were like they were the team in Formula 4 and had been for years, weren't they? They were like the team to be with. Wow. Yeah. So you basically you went there and beat them on your own, and they thought, yeah.
Mind you, if Alan, what's his name, Alan Cornock from Royal would listen to me, because his car used to run, and I picked that up right away, and I told Pat used to get the feedback from David Sears, who was the works driver, but Dave had a way of driving, like he would kick the steering wheel and get the car sideways, so the car for him never understeered.
Right.
But for somebody that drove delicate, and then 2 years later, Pat said to me, I wish I listened to you earlier. But Alan Cornock would not follow what I said. And so that's why I moved to Van Diemen, because whenever I asked some changes in the car, he wouldn't listen to me.
And I guess you can't, when you're part of a team, you can't work with people that aren't going to listen or take on board what you have to say or anything like that. It doesn't help, does it? It's
And then I had the best team saying to me, I want you next year. So I said, okay, we're doing. So that's how I made the change. But had Alan Cornock listened to me and helped me, we would probably have won more races that year with that car.
Sure. You could have.
And I wouldn't have to leave.
Yeah, and the team could have grown and maybe gone on. And
well, I wouldn't be able to afford racing a second year if I okay, we're starting. I said, well, Rolf, we got to talk about something. I said, what? I said, I don't have any money. I can only survive a couple of weeks in England. Say, can you drive a van? Say, sure, I've got a license. Okay, you're going to be my van driver for the factory, and I'll pay you money to live. And that's how I supported myself in the second year in 80.
I'm just trying to apply this to like the present day, because it just would never happen. It's so far away from today, isn't it? Wow, but it just shows on how you can, how you could go racing if you know what you're doing and you know the right people and you can back it up.
Mind you, Lewis Hamilton got picked up in karting.
Mm-hmm.
By a Formula One team who support his career. Verstappen got picked up in karting. Yeah. So it's still possible to do it today.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, maybe not as much, but it's still, if you get the right driver. But when you're with, just got here, put together. When you were with Van Diemen, you had like almost instant success. Obviously no success is instant, but was it you won the British Formula 4 title, 8 wins, took 3 wins in the European Series, and of course the Formula Ford Festival. That was a huge thing back then, wasn't it? It was a big deal, and you won it, which is obviously a big sort of step in the right direction. I guess.
Oh, the whole season was a great. I believe I won 15 out of 30 races, if I'm not wrong, for Van Diemen. We did some other races like the RAC, and if I remember the first race in Brands Hatch, Tommy Byrne got me at the start because Ralph was supporting Tommy in the P&O Championship and the RAC, I believe, and me on the 1000 Torrents Championship, which was the main championship. So he never put us together other than the couple of races at the beginning just to get us going. We went to Brands Hatch, this first race together. Overtook for the first time ever Tommy Byrne between the S's and clearways. Between those two, I overtook him fair and square without touching him, and he did not expect that ever. And then he went on the outside of paddock for a revenge, and he just threw his car at me to crash. So. Yeah, and Tom and I are good friends, but we started like that. That was our first race together. And he went on the outside of paddock on me and hitting me, and I got a little shy and I let him go, because I don't know, it wasn't my style of driving. But we went to the next race in Crawford. So this time I say, I'm going to have this guy again. Like exactly what he's done to me, I'm going to do that to him. And we had this fantastic race, the last lap. When I got to the last lap on the back straight, I went next to him, he started hitting me. So I hit him back. And we hit each other all the way down the straight. And before the last corner, which was a right-hander, there was a little kink to the left. So I went on the outside of that kink. So the last corner I would be on the inside. But in order for him to let me do that, I had to kick him out of the way just before that kink. So I was able to make the kink on the outside and won the race. And from that day, best mates ever. And Ralph avoided to put us together in the same race.
Keep these guys apart. This could get expensive.
So, yeah.
Brilliant. And Tommy was amazing character. Great.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
great.
he was a driver that I fully respected in those
Yeah.
days, Tommy.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. There's a question come up from our good friend John Campbell. We've got to say thank you to John for putting me in touch with you. So thank you very much, John. This is a bit off topic, a bit of a sidestep, but I'm intrigued about this. John has said, please ask Roberto about his Ferrari F1 steering wheel. It feels like there's a story behind this.
Well, in 1988, when I was trying to race the Formula 3000 Championship with zero money, at the end, towards the end, when we were able to do so many races, and we got to Monza and we won the race there, and we were surviving on prize money.
Right.
Like I bought a car to pay at the end of the year. I borrowed the engine, and Gary Anderson talked to Ron Salt from Bromley Motorsport for us to do 3 races, convincing Ron that if I did well for that would bring some sponsorship to the team after 3 races. As it happens, in the 3rd race, I won the race in Pau, south of France, beating Alesi at the time.
Oh.
And I was really sad because that was my last race. It was the 3rd race that the team promised to put up for me. So here I am in the podium, really sad. Walking back to the transporter, which was half of the size of most of the teams, because Ron Salt used to sell chickens, I believe,
okay,
in that kind of trucks. And I remember our car would not go in like this. You would have to lift the front to be able to close the back door. That's how small our transporter was. And everything would go underneath of the car. So Ron taps they paid me money for you winning the race here in Pau. And this check here, the next race is Silverstone, down the road from where I live. If you want, we could do with that money. I said, great, let's do it. So we went to Silverstone, we won Silverstone, we got another check, we went to Monza. We won Monza, we made the hat trick for the first time in the Formula 3000 history. And I was celebrating in the podium with some friends from Brazil that came to watch me. It was actually the people that worked for Nelson in his boat, in his new boat in Italy, building his boat. They came a couple of hours down the road to Monza to watch me racing. And I was spraying champagne around them. This guy, really well dressed from Ferrari, that I did not know, hand me this card. And I grabbed the card, put it in my pocket, said, no problem, I'll call him, no worries. And then the champagne around my friends. He had asked me to call his boss that wanted to talk to me. I had no idea where this guy was from. I was just so happy to what was happening. Anyway, that led into a 3-year test contract with Ferrari. First year I would test, which would be from September to March on that same year, and the following year. They then put me at Coloni. I was signed by, but they put me at Coloni to race the second year of the contract, 1989. And the 3rd year, I would race for Ferrari. Except the Enzo Ferrari died, Fiat came in with new people, and they cleaned the house. Anything that this guy built up before, they threw out of the window. Anyway, we got to Kings Bromley. My wife now is pregnant. sorry, my daughter was born, because when she went to England, just before she went to England, my daughter was born. Um, we living in a house that Gary Anderson convinced his neighbor friend to let us use, which was his mother's house, who had passed away, and he allowed us to use that house while we were in England. What they've done is they put all her items into one bedroom. They closed that, and they allowed us to use the rest of the house. So that's how I got free housing that year. And I was calling Pee Wee in Australia to tell him how everything went in Monza. And I said, by the way, Pee Wee, this guy card, my wife almost washed the suit with the card inside, but she took it out in time, gave it to me. And then I said, and I was looking at this card, and I said, P, do you know this guy Marco Piccinini? I said, no. Oh, this guy gave me this card, asked me to call him. And then as I was talking to Pee Wee on the phone in England, collect call to Australia, of course, because I couldn't afford to call Australia. The sun went through the clouds in England, and they hit the card, and there was a horse embossed on the card. And that was the first time I realized that guy was the top guy at Ferrari then.
Wow.
So, cutting a long story short, I became a test driver for Ferrari. They paid me quite a lot of money to become a test driver. They gave me some sponsorship from Marlboro to finish up the season in 88 in 3000. And I was in Formula One the following year. And I had that steering wheel gearbox car. I was in charge to develop from the day that wasn't working to the day that Nigel Mansell won the first race in Brazil in 89. And I have that steering wheel here in my house.
Oh, that is a cool thing to have. That's like a history making thing. I mean, this is nowhere near as impressive, but I won I won this in a competition, which
there
is
you go. Look at that
steering wheel signed by Nigel Mansell. But you've definitely got me on that one.
Well, it's the very first one with a paddle shifter that ever was implemented. I hope to sell it one day to help my grandkids going to college.
I think it will certainly help. I think that's going to be worth having for someone. That's fantastic. What a great story. Love that. And thank you, John, for bringing that up. Let's have a quick one. Yeah, I've got a couple more questions. We're going to come to that, questions about Suzuka and things. But we fast forwarded there just a bit because prior to F3000, which I didn't realize you were living sort of race to race almost. I mean, we mentioned off air that I saw you racing in 88 in Formula 3000 at Brands Hatch. We'll come to. Wasn't a great day, but we'll come to you. Prior to that, your sort of first involvement, I think your first involvement in F1 was through Colin Chapman?
It was Peter Collins. Peter Collins was one of the managers at Lotus. And Peter used to chase talents around. And he came to the Formula Ford Festival, which Van Diemen dominated. And I happened to do quite well there. And he signed me up a 3-year contract, and he gave me money to survive for 3 years.
Right.
So with that money, I was able to hang around England every year and find drives out of nowhere. that just happened to me, you know. So soon after the Formula Ford Festival, I signed a 3-year testing agreement with Lotus through Peter Collins, who convinced.
Right. Wow. I mean, at that time as well. And obviously, Colin, the Lotus cars were known for being quick, but not particularly safe, as we know, back in the 70s, and then ground effect.
Mind
And all
you,
that stuff. I mean, it was an amazing
81,
run.
in 81, 82, he was building the carbon fiber cars.
Yeah. Oh,
They were
yeah.
quite good, quite safe. Not very fast, but quite safe.
Yeah, like a bit of like a change of direction for them. And obviously they were the like black John Player special, and they just look great as well.
Yeah.
One of my favorite cars from when I was a kid.
They paid me $10,000 a year,
Oof.
which allowed me to buy an air ticket and live in England for the next 3 years.
Wow! Just on the back of the contract, you got 3 years in England. Wow, that's very cool. But just want to. I mean, I'm going through the notes here. I mean, there's so much we can talk about, but you also raced in Formula 3 at that time while you were under the contract with Lotus. I guess you did F3, and then you moved to the States. I mean, can you talk us through what was going on at that kind of a time as well?
Okay, well, just imagine I won everything that could be won in 80 in Formula Ford,
Yeah.
or the best things that could be won, I should say. At the end of the year, I didn't have money to go racing. That was it. Other than the money that I had no sponsor, no hope to go anywhere, except I was a very good in setting up a car. I was extremely good at that, sensitive as no one, or some of the best. And I was hanging around, watching races. This team called Baron Racing, and that's why I say friends have helped me throughout. The team manager was Kees van der Grint, a guy that he comes from karting, and this Dutch gentleman hired Kees to set up a team for his son to race in England. His son's name was Glenn Bosch. Glenn, in a Christmas, more or less a Christmas of 1980, with the team ready to go for 81 in Formula 3 in England, had a car accident where his father used to live, and he crashed his face. He had to reconstruct his face. So Kees called the owner and said, look, should we stop with the team? And the owner said, well, why don't you hire a Dutch driver and let's go racing until Glenn is going through his operations. So they hired Michael Blickenmolen.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And they raced for half a season, more or less. And then Kees one day had enough, because he didn't like the way Blickenmolen used to relate to driving. He couldn't tell him anything, apparently, and Kees was very frustrated. So Mr. Bosch, the owner of the team, suggested that he tried some other drivers, before he quit, because the team was already running, and might as well finish the year. So he tested maybe 3 drivers, Brands Hatch Club circuit, and I was the last one to drive. And Ron Toranak, because he knew doing nothing. And Kees van der Green mentioned to Ron Toronac that he wanted to try other drivers. Ron Toronac told him that he should try me.
Right.
So in the first part of the year in England, I spent a lot of time at Ron Toronac's shop, just looking him building new cars, seeing the Formula 2 car being built, the ground effect cars, and I've learned a lot there. So we went testing in Brands Hatch, which I knew quite well. And after the two drivers tested the car, I jumped in. So I did 3 laps and I come in the pits. I say, Kate, I'm not sure what's happening, but it's understeering. Well, you only done 3 laps. The tires are still cold. I said, but that's how I feel. I get there in the car. I feel the car understeering. Really? I said, yeah. I said, don't you want to, isn't that a fast corner? Shouldn't we put some front wing? So he said, okay, let's do that. And then he put 2 degrees of front wing. And then I went out. I come straight back in. I said, that's better, but you can do 1 more. So, okay, put 1 more. So now I drive the car. The car is not understeering anymore. And I start driving. And I learned the car and I start driving. And not soon after, I don't know, 10, 15 laps on that car, on the circuit I knew really well, I beat the other guys' times because I had changed the car and they didn't.
Right,
but,
right.
So,
and this was your first time in the car?
Yes, yeah. Ever in a Formula 3 car.
Crikey. Was that be the first time in a wing, in a car with a wing?
Yeah, no, I had one. I had races in the US, and I did 2 races the year before. When Royale built a Formula 4 into a Formula 4 2000 car, they asked me to drive.
Right.
First race, I crashed in the first lap. About 5 or 6 cars crashed. And we did the second race at Mallory Park, and we almost won the race from 8th. After there was a little problem that happened. David Leslie pulled away in the lead, and I come from the back, and I finished the race right on his gearbox.
Wow! So 1 more lap, and
that was the experience I had with a wing car before that day.
Wow!
So Kay suddenly have somebody that he can relate to technically,
right?
And after a few runs, and then now he's excited and we're talking and blah blah blah, and then I said, Case, in the Formula Ford car, the car must touch the ground to be quick here. Right. This car doesn't touch the ground. Oh, really? So he lowered the car. And of course, and I didn't know this, in the ground effect car, the lower you run to the ground, the quicker it goes.
Yeah. Sucks
so
it down.
Suddenly, I went out and I said, wow, I did a couple of laps, I went quicker. And then I said, Case, this is fantastic. And the car is not touching the ground yet. So let's lower a bit more. So we lowered a bit more. I went fast. We put new tires. I think I went under the lap record, if I'm not wrong. But I did a time that was exceptional. And he said, wow. So I said, Roberto, let's lower a bit more. So I said, okay, but the car's touching now. So, and through this, I touched the ground and I went straight into the tires. And I destroyed the front. left corner on the car before clearaways.
Oh, dear.
So here he comes. He looks at the car. He doesn't talk much. And then I'm just there. Okay. So we took the car back. And then he made a phone call to the owner. He said, well, I got the bad news and the good news. The good news is I found the driver that I wanted. The bad news is he destroyed the car. But he did extremely well, and I want him in the team. So they decided to take me, and I did the last part of 81 for Byron Racing and Kees van der Grient as the team manager. And to my third race, it was a race in Silverstone that was together with the European Championship. So if you race in the British Championship, you race Avon tires. If you race in the European tire. So I'm testing, and I'm quick on the. I was like fourth or fifth quickest in the British Championship. Toranak shows up, and he's good friends with Bridgestone people and Honda, and he said, Roberto, would you like to try this new Formula 3 Bridgestone tires that I have here? I've got 2 sets. I've got to give it to somebody to try, but since you're not racing the championship, the only one that could try them. So I said, okay, let's do it. So now we're racing the European race, not the British race anymore. And we put the Bridgestone in the car, and I went really fast in it. Qualified on pole and won the race.
Wow.
My third race ever in Formula 3.
And so I mean, and I've got here just from looking at it. That was the first of, what was it, 3 wins you took in F3? I think I don't know if it was 2 or 3.
One of them later. Yeah, one of them we got disqualified, but that was later on.
Yeah.
But did quite well for my first year in Formula 3. But unfortunately, I was only replaced, and we're doing the half of the season.
Yeah, sure. So, I guess there was no option for the following year. You couldn't get anywhere else.
The following year was the same. I didn't have a drive. There was a situation with the British team racing based in very nice gentleman, Mike Reed. They had Afonso Toledano driving for them in '82, and Nelson in Brazil had to turn down a sponsorship from a watch company called Citizen.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And they wanted to do, actually, no, sorry, I'm making a mistake here. It was a different sponsor. It was a oil company that they wanted to do an ad with Nelson for their oil. Nelson could not do because clash of interest with his sponsors.
Right.
He passed that on to me. They wanted a picture on a Brazilian magazine with a Brazilian driver with this oil name in the race car to do 1-page ad. Right. And they paid us $15,000.
Wow. So
I took that money to England. I still had my Lotus contract. I took that money to England, and Ivan Sluma had stopped with Afonso Toledano, who ran out of money halfway through, and he did 2 or 3 races. After 2 races, I realized the engine that we were running was really bad. And I asked Mike, can you rebuild the engine at least? And then once he rebuilt the engine, he took to this very, very good guy in Anglia cars. They used to build this Argo Formula 3 car, and they used to do their own engines.
Okay.
And this gentleman, they used to work at Pedrozzani in Italy in the past. Exceptional good engine. The first with the rebuild engine, we won. And we won, I think, 4. And then Mike Reed turns around to me and said, Roberto, I cannot continue. I don't have the money. I say, Mike, what about if I get you free engines? Would that help? Say yes. So Alfa Romeos were winning in Europe, but every time you put them in a route car in England, it would the engine would break.
Right.
So I went to Pedrozzani, who 2 years in 81 personally, I made a trip to Italy just to visit him and for him to know me. I called him in 82 and said, look, there's a situation here. I hear that you have those Alfa engines laying around here somewhere. What about if we make them work for you? Because I need engines, they need support. So Alfa Romeo paid to develop the engine. So it took 3 races, the thing breaking down, until they got it right. So now I also won a race or 2 with the Alfa engines. And
you've got them on board.
So unfortunately, Mike Reed did not stick to his words, which was take me all the way to the end of the year. And there was a young kid from France, offered him some sponsorship, and he took over my seat for the few, I think 3 or 4 races.
Right.
But Mike has helped me a lot. He gave me a road car to drive in England. He used to let me stay at his house. I got on with his wife really well, who looked after me like a mother. So although he wasn't very fair in the racing side with me, after all I've done for him, he looked after me as a person in England.
Yeah. So so there's that. You've got that tie to him, which is obviously nice. That's fantastic stuff. Just having a quick look down here. One thing I do want to just quickly talk about is you ended up going out to where you are now, out in the States. You did a little bit of the Formula Atlantic and out to IndyCar. What sort of brought around that kind of spell over in the States? Because you did a handful of races. Was it for like Gallus Racing, and then you had a full season? Was it just
before that in 85, I went to the States in 83. And it all started when Nigel Mansell hurt his arm or his wrist.
Yes, with Lotus, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And then Peter Wall calls me and say, Roberto, I know you haven't done much testing in the Lotus. We only took you up and down the straights at Snetterton, one time in Brazil. I know you haven't done much at all, but we might need you to go to Zandvoort and try the Lotus. I say, why? I say, well, because Nigel is hurt, blah, blah, blah. I say, can I test the car? I say, sure. So we went to Brands Hatch, and as it happened, it was damp.
Ah, right.
and he wouldn't allow me. It was damp.
Right.
So
I guess he
he
needed it to be
stayed.
dry for you to. Yeah.
Well, if I'm driving a car in the Grand Prix, I've got to drive that car in any condition.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, especially a ground effect car. Had I done that in Brands Hatch, I would know I wouldn't be fit to drive that car.
Right. Right.
Because I didn't do that, which I think was very irresponsible of really driving a ground effect car ever at that speed, at the speed that needs to be driven.
Especially at Zandvoort, which is a fast circuit.
Yeah. So I did not qualify. Elio De Angelis qualified, I believe, 19th or something. I did not qualify. And that destroyed my reputation from this
Which
young
feels
kid.
incredibly unfair. It feels very, very unfair that you. I mean, obviously that was all they could judge you on, but under the situation that you were in.
But people would say, "Well, we got this kid that was awesome in Formula Ford, that did quite well in some Formula 3 races, but hasn't won a championship,
Yeah,
and he can't drive a Formula 1 car."
that
That was
doesn't
the
look
that was
right.
the name around. That was what the reputation started to. People started to talk about me.
Sure, sure.
Now, because of that, um, I lost 5 years of my career. I had to do a full circle around the world
Yeah.
to eventually get another break in '87.
Yes. Yeah. Which
So
I don't know if you can see is in that car there. That's the AGS. Um, in that
I did a full circle because of that bad um, choice or decision, I would say, from Peter Wool to put me in the car without being ready for it, without
Sure.
testing, straight into a Grand Prix. I didn't know any better. I had to do what he told me.
Sure. Yeah.
I wasn't ready for that. For car was heavy steering wheel. I was just a skinny little guy that could not turn the steering wheel on the heavy loads.
Sure. Sure.
At one point, Elio followed me. He said, "Roberto, I'm going to follow you." I said, "Okay." And then we stopped. I said, "Roberto, you beating me all the way to the last corner. Before the straight, you give it up." I turn, the steering locks, I can't turn anymore. I have to back off.
Wow. And
that
was it.
that was it, man. And that from that weekend on, nobody wanted to know one car. So
that must have been heartbreaking, I guess, or just it must have just been a horrible time because it was almost out of your hands, wasn't it? It was someone else's decision, and you had to go with it.
But Lotus, in a way, paid me money to go back to England. So if I wasn't in England because of that money, I wouldn't have got the Formula 3 drives.
Sure.
So it's, but Peter Wu knew that I wasn't ready. He had knowledge. He should never have chosen me to replace Nigel.
Sure. I guess if another driver had gone in, and it might, you might have stayed at Lotus, but
any stronger driver would do it. So that led into us do a lot of races in Atlantics. Pee-wee took me to the Australian Grand Prix at the end of '81. I won the Australian Grand Prix, beating Nelson, Alan Jones, Lafitte, in the car that was equal to everybody else in my very first Formula Atlantic race. at the end of 81.
Wow.
So in 82 we did a race at the beginning of 82 with the Grand Prix in Long second in front of Alonso Jr.
Yes, a little Al, yeah.
who Rick Gallas was supporting. And
yes,
then I
he
beat
drove for
him.
him for a while, didn't he? Yeah, he
Yeah,
drove for
and
him.
I beat him at that race. So Rick Gallas remembered this in 85 when he needed a driver.
Oh, right, even.
So that I'm just trying to show you how things came together slowly.
Yeah.
So I now I was one of the quickest driver in Atlantic cars. We did a championship. We went to Australia, Macau, Kuala Lumpur, New Zealand, and we won the international FIA Mondial Championship, which was Formula Atlantics and Pacific cars.
Right.
In one side of the world they call Atlantics, on the other side they call Pacific. Sure. So at the end of 82, after all that happened, Pee Wee said to me, look, we have a car. I know a fellow in Long Beach that wants us to race the Long Beach Grand Prix again, and he'll pay us enough money so we can do the Formula Atlantic Championship in the US for the full season.
Okay.
So we all took off to America. We had his daughter, my girlfriend, English girlfriend that teach me lots of English, and we ready to race in Long Beach before the Grand Prix again in 83. Race got cancelled, replaced by Formula Super V race, because right. Super V paid to become part of the Grand Prix.
Oh, they bought them. Okay.
So here we are in America.
So they bought their way in.
Here we are in America, but we couldn't race because my sponsor interest was Long Beach. He would give enough money for us to stay and do the full championship, but we had to do Long Beach for him.
Right.
Otherwise, it was no good for him because all his customers were from California. Right. So here we are, we're looking at each other. The first race now got postponed after the Grand Prix to Willow Springs, where the shuttle lands.
Yeah.
So Pee Wee was ready to go home. I said, no, Pee, we've got to do that race. We're here. You, me, the mechanics. I said, Roberto, I have no money. I have one new set of. That's all I have. Be careful. I'll drive the old tires and we'll put the new tires for the race. Yeah, but what about entry fee? Well, let's convince your friend sponsor to pay for that. And we borrowed a couple of cars from him because he's got a dealership in Santa Monica. Come on. What about if you crash? I said, I'm not crashing, P. You know that. So eventually I convinced him. And he said, okay, let's do this. So we rented a trailer, an open trailer. We borrowed a couple of cars from Bill Cargas from Ocean Motors. And he paid our entry fee, if I'm not wrong. So we went to Willow Springs. I'm driving this Jeep with the car, with a trailer in the back, an open trailer that on the side and I wish I had that picture, had a sign saying, "Rent me," and the phone number. That's the trailer we went to the first race
Wow.
with. And all the parts of the car were sort of on top of the car, wrapped around with tape and rope. So when we got to Willow Springs, people didn't really recognize what was arriving, you
Sure.
know.
Sure.
And then, and then I see this big transporter called Electrolux with 4 Atlantic cars. And I look at that, I say, well, that's a good place to park next to in case we need some parts.
Yeah. Good thinking. Wow. Thinking on your feet.
So I parked right next to him. And you should see the faces of the mechanics when they came to check us out. They all put their faces outside of the transporter to look us. And 5 of us jump out of this Jeep. And there was soot on the trailer. And cutting a long story short, we beat them. And we got prize money good enough to go to the next race. And then one more race. And then we had to stop.
Right.
My career was finished again. Went
Jeez.
back to England. Um, I convinced Dave Price, that was leading the Formula 3 championship, richest Grand Prix Formula 3 race. And he decided to put a second car for me, or third car, whatever it was, for free. And he was winning everything. So I was ready to go and race there. 2 weeks before the race, I got a phone call from America. It was a bloke called Kerry Agapew, who used to store Teddy Ip's Formula Atlantic cars from Macau.
God.
Teddy Ip used to run the Marlboro team, and the Formula Atlantic cars were stored by Kerry Agapew in California.
So there was a car there. Right.
The 3 cars. Kerry calls me and said, Roberto, your mechanics are windsurfing here in California doing nothing. If you can convince them to work for prize money, I can convince Teddy Ip to put $5,000 to rebuild one of his engines, and we can go to the next race in Elkhart Lake.
Okay. So it's Road America, isn't it? Yeah. Road America.
Yeah. Okay. I say, well, except if I did that, I wouldn't be able the British Grand Prix Formula. So I decided to go back to America. And because the Kerry said, look, if we do well, we can keep going to the end of the year. And with Dave Price, I could only do 1 race.
So it was like a longer term opportunity for you.
So so off I went to the States, got to Road America, never been there before. Michael, a couple of weeks before, they wouldn't give me any tips because I had beaten them a couple of races at the beginning of the year. So I needed to know the wing setup because they used to cover the wings those days, so you wouldn't see.
I see.
So I stopped my car in front of Michael Andretti's team, which was a long way away from where my team was, up the top of the hill. So at the bottom of the hill, I stopped the car in front of his team. I played like if something went wrong in my car. My mechanics walked all the way down pit lane to my car. When they got to me, I told them, just hang around, make sure my wheel is not falling off. They thought there's something wrong with the suspension, so they start looking at it. And then I saw Michael Andretti driving his car into his pit. I jumped out of the car. I went all the way to the back of his car and I measured his rear wing with my body.
Okay.
And I looked at the team owner who I knew and I said, "Thank you." Cover the wings. I did all that. And that's how I got the wing
Wow.
set up to race at that race.
Wow.
And we beat Michael there too, and got some prize money. We went to the next race, got some prize money, went to the next race. We end up winning 4 races in that year. Michael won 3, but the 3 that he won, I did not finish, and the 4 that I won, he came second. So he won the championship.
Wow. And maybe if you had finished those races, you might have beaten him some more. And yeah,
Well,
I just
I
love that, finding a way to get a bit of knowledge, a bit of an advantage to help your progress. Absolutely
I
fantastic.
remember, but God has helped me a lot. To things just dropped from the sky to me.
Sure.
Like I remember in Detroit, press conference park before the Grand Prix. There was a race before the Grand Prix, so they put us in the car park. They invited the press to meet us, and this lady come to me. Oh, my daughter went to Brazil. She loved Brazil. Blah 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 Brazil, and and then she asked me about the racing, and I told her. I said, look, we're here, but we only have 2 sets of tires, one old, one new, same situation as I had in Willow Springs. Um, and we don't have much money. We've got an engine rebuilt, but we cannot pay the engine, blah, blah, blah. As it happened, she was related to the sponsors of the Detroit Grand Prix race in '83. She comes back the next day to our garages with a check for $5,000 and some decals to put in the car. Of the other sponsors, a hot dog company, to do the same. Now we had money to go racing.
Jeez. Just
Yeah.
imagine the people you meet and how they help you in ways that you can't
Yeah.
expect, and
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that reminds me of the stories of Eddie Cheever. I mean, I had Eddie on here for a chat, and he said that when
Please don't compare me with Eddie.
no,
We're different.
no.
Please, please.
But no, he got paid in potato chips, which he then sold to
Uh,
Adafruit Racing to then go racing. But it's a weird
good
story,
for
all
him.
these little things. But that's for another day. But so you went from there and you got some prize money, you went racing, and you ended up racing with Rick Gallis in IndyCar.
Now,
Later.
before that, I decided that the only way I could have another break in Formula One would be if I had another go in Formula 3, the proper way.
Ah, yeah.
So I went to Nelson. I went to the best team in Formula 3 this time, which was, what's his name?
West Surrey Racing.
Racing.
Dick Bennett.
Dick
Yeah.
Bennett.
Yeah.
And I say, Dick, I want to drive for you. I said, Roberto, I want you to my team, but we need money here. So I went to Nelson and I said, look, I've done all this, but the only way I can really get back into the groove is if I do a full season in Formula 3, I might get recognized again and might get another chance in Formula 1.
Sure.
And he said, okay, I'll pay for it. Dick. And we went testing in Truxton. So when I went there, Ron Toronak is testing the Formula 2 car, Casio Honda car. And I said, Roberto, what are you doing here? I said, Ron, this has happened. Um, why didn't you tell me? He says, I need a driver in my Formula 2 team. I say, Ron, why didn't you tell me before? Oh, now it's too
we needed
late.
a phone call here.
So I went home. I tested the Formula 3 car. Did quite well. It was a great car. Went home. I think I was staying with Pee Wee at the time. And I said, P, what about if Toronak is a good friend with Dick? What about if they talk and Dick allows me to drive for Ron? So Ron accepted that, did a deal with Dick. He released me. I didn't have to pay any money anymore. And I was now a works driver for the Route Honda team and got paid.
In like Formula 2.
Formula 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except I didn't realize I had to come second for Mike Thacker.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because well, you two teammates, you two were close all season, weren't you? On
Well, we're the fastest car,
yeah.
but Ron Toronak told me later that I had to finish second to Michael because he had helped Jonathan Palmer win the championship in '83. Therefore, it was his turn now.
Right. I see. But they obviously didn't tell you that at the start.
No.
But I guess it's
so that was
and...
it. And then at the end of that year, I became a very good driver with ground effect cars. I handled really well everything. The car used to jump and I was still flat in top gear. So I've learned how to drive ground effect cars.
Yeah, it was like a good school.
And it was a good season. No matter that, regardless that I couldn't finish, I couldn't go on the championship. So they did all kinds of things. If there's a guy there called Alan Hall, that he used to make sure things was harmed for me not to win races or beat Michael. But it wasn't easy. But I fought through it.
Yeah.
And at the end, I could not win the championship, but I was able to show my potential to Ron, and he apologized eventually to me, but he had to do that.
Yeah,
as a company.
Yeah, but at least you've got back into F2. You've had a good season. You're back on the map, I guess.
Yes. Now Pat Seaman is running the Tolman car that Senna drove in '84. And there's a possibility for me to replace him for '85 in a non-ground effect car. And they took me testing. And I did really well, except switched from Pirellis to Michelin halfway in the season for Senna, at Senna's request. And I think Michelin left Formula One at the end of '84, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
And there was only Goodyear and Pirelli the following year. Pirellis wouldn't give tires to Benetton, to Tolman. And Goodyear didn't like what they did to Pirelli, so they wouldn't give them tires neither.
Right.
So I tried to get that seat, and by doing so, I've turned down Rick Gallas that wanted me to drive for him for the full season.
I see.
So by the time I asked Rick every week, he called me, and I kept delaying, and then when Tolman were told they didn't have tires for that season, I was 3 days too late to sign with Rick Gallas.
Oh, right.
So here I am now in England. At my great friend's house that Pee-wee introduced me to, Charles Ivy in London. He put me up. He let me use his phone. He supported me throughout until I found something to do. And what happened was Mr. Kawamoto, the president of Honda, who knew about me accepting to come second on that championship in Formula 2. I didn't have a seat for the following year. He calls me in England and said, Roberto, would you be interested to race Formula 2 in Japan? It's late, but I can find you a team to drive. And he arranged a team, a Yokohama team from a very nice team owner, Moto Mariuaki-san, and his partner, to run me a spare car from the previous year in some of the races. And Honda helped them to pay for it. And that's how I got 6 races in Japan.
Right.
6 or 7 races in '85. Friend somewhere helping and extending his hands for me to go racing.
That's incredible.
And then couple of weeks or 3 or 4 weeks after I signed with the team in Japan from Nova Engineering, I got a call from Rick Gallas. Say, Roberto, my driver Pancho Carter has a hip. He had an accident that his hip was injured a long time. He cannot drive on street and road courses. Would you like to take that job? So I looked at the schedule, and the races did not clash between Japan and America.
Perfect.
So I went into this crazy thing about America to race 6 races in Formula 2 in Japan and 6 races in America in IndyCars.
Wow.
And yeah.
That's. I mean, I can remember Pancho Carter in the Indy 500, and they said that he hadn't raced for a while due to injury, and obviously that was the one that you kind of like benefited from. I mean, at that time,
I must go and get my charger. I must go and get my charger quickly because my phone.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. This is all rather good, isn't it, folks? What a legend. What a lovely guy. That's a cool background as well, isn't it? But no, we're going to come to F1 and IndyCar soon. But this is fantastic. So do stick with us, folks. Here we are. Man is back. Comment here from Oliver Taylor. The story is amazing. All the ups and the downs, the politics, the coincidences, the good and bad fortune. This is proper motor racing. Yes, absolutely. Completely agree. We love it. Yeah, proper racing, not sanitized. No, thank you for getting the charger. That's good. That's great. So I mean, at that time, were you still thinking of F1, or were you thinking, well, there's obviously an opportunity here with IndyCar?
Well, Rick signed me up for '86, and Gary Anderson was in the team in '85. That's when I first met him, and we got on really well. And he was like Kees van der Greent, very technical. He loved to work with me, and I loved working with him. There was another driver in the team, Jeff Brabham. In '86, Rick Gallis signed me for the full season, including all the oval races and all the street courses.
Right.
So, except there were two cars to pick. March, designed by Adrian Newey, and Lola, designed by, I forgot his name, unfortunately. But as you know, the March car was aero-orientated by Adrian Newey, and the Lola car. And Gary loved the mechanical side of the Lola, and he chose the Lola, and the March was a much better aero car.
Right.
And we struggled throughout the year with the Lola, although we did quite well considering. We struggled. So there, I made $300,000 first year, the second year, 350. Enough money to settle down. And I say to Gary, I say, Gary, I'm leaving. I want to go back to, actually, I told him I want to go back to England. I say, what? I say, Gary, I made enough money now that I can support myself for a couple of years, and I'm getting old now. If I don't go back to Europe or England, I will not make ever to Formula One. I have to. They say, yeah, but you don't need to. You got your career booming for you here in the US. Everybody rates you. Everybody wants you. You know, we're gonna get a proper a car that's competitive next year, and you're gonna be on top form again. There's no need for you to go to Europe. Yeah, but you know, that thing with the Lotus still hurts me.
It was like unfinished business.
I've got to prove. Yes.
Yeah.
Roberto, now, and you got to start. I want to go back. So, as it happens, his friend Ron Salt, who was his partner at Anson Racing, that went broke, and that's the reason Gary went to America to make money to build a house again that the bank took away from him.
I see. Okay.
Was a Formula 3000 team. It was trying to get Gary back to England. So he called Ron, and Ron said, well, I can run Roberto in one race at Birmingham at the Grand Prix.
Oh, that's
super. And we look at the dates.
Crazy.
And I could do that. So I went from America to do one race in England. Got there, Ron Tarnack bumps into me right at the meeting. What are you doing here? I say, Ron, I want to come back. I made enough money there. America is great, but I can go back there one day again. I want to try Formula One.
Wow.
I want to come back. Okay, you're driving for me next year. And we shook hands, and I was driving the Route Honda Formula 3000 team the following year by 5 minutes of conversation with Ron Tarnack.
And that was for the 88 season. Was it 88?
For the 87.
87 season, sorry. I mean, very quickly, you mentioned Birmingham. Now, we've had a few of the British touring car drivers on here. And they've all said that Birmingham was great fun, but absolutely almost stupid. It was just a silly idea. What did you think? Because I remember watching those F3000 cars as a kid, thinking they were even more amazing than the F1 cars. What was it like driving around Birmingham, the streets?
Okay, well, I disagree with those guys, first of all. And I'll ask you a question. Would you think racing in Pau or Monaco is silly?
Absolutely not. But this is the British thing.
Same thing.
Because we've all driven around Birmingham. I mean, you know, all of us Brits have driven around Birmingham and we think, why would you race here? But obviously people think about that, think the same in other places. But those touring car guys aren't as brave as you guys because you were in single seater.
Don't know. I raced 3 times in Birmingham. I had a lovely time. I had a hard race in '86 that I crashed in the rain. '87, I started from the back, finished second. '88, we won the race.
Yeah.
I overtook, if you look one of the videos of the Birmingham Grand Prix, I overtook Martini on the outside in a very bumpy corner.
Yeah. Well, I think the whole track looked bumpy. I don't know if it was, but
it was very bumpy. It was a challenge racing there, but racing is about challenges.
Exactly. And anyone who's watched any of these, I will know that I always try and get 2 things in. I always try and get IndyCar in, and I always try and get street circuits in because I'm a huge fan of street circuits because, as you say, racing should be about the challenge. Okay, it's great for us watching, but a street circuit is one of the biggest challenges, isn't it? Because if you get it wrong, it's game over. And that's why I love places like Pau and Macau and the Super Prix and Monaco and all these other circuits, Long Beach, because of the challenge.
And this year with so it wasn't a problem. And I made sure of that before shaking hands with Ron Toronak. And he said, no problem. You have anything that you need to win every race. Except Alan Hall was still there. And he was mad at me.
Right.
Because we had all kinds of fights in the past. And I say to Ron, what about Alan? He said, don't worry, I will be there. But behind the scenes, Alan always did something for me to harm me. And I don't know what, but it always happened with me. Okay? So in Silverstone, I was leading the race, the first race, with my teammate second, and I broke a 4th gear. So I asked my mechanics, how come we can break the teeth on the 4th gear? He said, well, the gears was all given by Alan. I said, okay. Right. So, second race we got to and I broke 4 laps to go on the lead. Donington on the lead again. 4 laps to go. I run out of front brakes because the fluid was used and went all the way down. I ran out of front brakes. Only finished the race with just rear brakes.
Jeez.
Paul.
At Donington. Oof.
Paul. On the lead. Easy win. Lap and a half to go. I ran out of gas. And it wasn't that we didn't have enough fuel tank to put gas. Again, who calculated the amount of fuel that went in my car? Alan Hall.
So he obviously had the problem with you and was trying to stop you.
And then, then we went to Spa. And we went to, second race, we went to Vallelunga. I was nowhere on the grid. I was like 22nd. And I struggled the weekend. I almost jumped on the T car, but Alan kept saying, oh, you need to do the shocks, you need to do this, you need to do that. So I kept doing it. Got to Spa after Vallelunga. Raining. So I'm driving around, come in the pits, changed the car, went out, changed the car, went out. And then I come in the pits, one of the red flags there, and Ron Toronak says to me, well, in the qualifying session, he said, well, when are you going to get going? I say, what are you talking about? I'm going. Say, no, you're not. You're not on the grid. What are you talking about? You're 33rd or something like that. You one of the last cars. I say, Ron, that's not possible. We changed the car. The car is better. He said, well, Roberto, you better get going. So I went out after the circuit was open again, and I blew the engine up. First time in my whole career, I drove a broken engine back to the pits because I wanted to jump in the T car. Jumped in the T car, went out, was another red, came back in. And I said, Ron, this car, stiff, is quicker than my car, all soft. Oh, maybe that's it. I said, no, because when we changed my car, it was quicker. Changed this car also. So you sure? Yeah, sure, change. So we softened the car up. It was green. I went out and I was able to do one lap before it flag, checker flag in qualifying. And I put it on pole. I got out of the car and I knew for a fact that Alan Hall had done something in my car.
He'd limited it.
And I came out of the car, they all clapping at me because it was like Senna in Monza when he did that one lap and put it on pole with the McLaren. Same thing. One lap, pole position from last on the grid. Everybody clapping. I got out of the car. I was ready to hit Alan.
I was good.
I say, bollocks with that. Where is Alan? My car. And we need to get and shout at me. Say, look, Roberto, no driver talk to me like that. I say, wrong. I'm not your driver anymore because if you don't fix this, I'm not driving for you again.
Yeah, absolutely right.
So this happened in Spa, and we got to the bottom of it. As it happened was, Ron Toronac had a plywood underneath of the cars. So he had to have all the screws to make good ground effect.
Yeah.
Or good fluid effect.
Yeah.
Somebody changed my fluid. Did not drill the holes underneath of the engine. So the fluid was flexing in the center of the car. And the car was balanced, but it was much slower. I brake earlier and accelerate later. And in the rain, I couldn't pick that up until I drove the other car.
Realized what,
And then I went to my mechanic, and then eventually they found this because Ron Toronac promised me he would get to the bottom of it. I say, I'm not driving another car other than the T car until you fix my car. And they got to the bottom of it. And I asked my mechanics, how come you forgot the bolt? Say, that fluid was changed by Alan Hall in the factory on Saturday night.
Of course it was.
Alan went to the factory to change my fluid, did not drill the hole.
Wow. And anyway. That had been going on, that kind of a thing had been going on all season.
But anyway, at the end of the day, we could have won 4 races, maybe 5, and I won 1 race in Enna Pergusa. And then I remember well, I came from 8th on the grid to win the race, or 6th on the grid. And last chicane before the flag, all the mechanics are ready for me to win the race. I come out of the chicane and I pull to the right like if my car broke down. And when the second place guy came behind me, I accelerate across the line to play a joke on the team. So,
yeah, just to give it a little bit back. Excellent.
Yeah. But it wasn't the team's fault. It was one guy's fault. He was playing around with me. and it was unfortunate.
That's terrible. That shouldn't happen, but I suppose at least you
It
at
did
least you
happen.
got to.
It did happen.
Wow, that's terrible. Wow, there's no words for that.
So 87 was that.
Yeah.
And then in Formula 2, when I was doing Formula 2, I met this guy, a nice French guy called Frédéric Denot. He was running the AGS team. And 87 in Formula 1, AGS was 4 seconds slower than the last car on the grid in every race.
Was that with Pascal Fabre, wasn't it?
Fabre, yeah. Monza was going. Monza, I think Coloni was going to start racing in 87. Therefore, Pascal Fabre would not qualify any longer.
Right.
So Frédéric Denot asked me if I could drive for them, which Ron Toranak would not allow me to. And then he said, well, can you test the car for us? I said, well, I'll ask Ron. So Ron said, as long as you have time to drive the Formula 3000 car before the next race, I allow you to.
Okay.
So we found a weekend that was possible. Happened to be a Friday before a Grand Prix somewhere else. AGS left the car, the T car, since they never qualify anyhow, they left the T car in Paul Ricard for me to test.
Okay.
With two mechanics and myself, we and the engineer that never really said anything, because he was in charge of designing the new car for the following year. I did the same setup as we did on the Formula 2 car and Formula 3000 car. And we made it lower, we put bump rubbers, soft springs. I knew the whole thing, how to set it up. And in one day, we went 4 seconds quicker with the car in Paul Ricard. I tested until nighttime, almost. I could see the circuit, but they couldn't see me. They could only see the red brakes on the car. Anyway, they took the shock absorbers to the next race, to the race on that weekend, which on Friday they did not qualify. They put the shocks on Saturday and they qualified. So I become a hero to AGS. They asked me to race the last 2 races, which was after the 3000 championship. And that was a full cycle to another break into Formula 1 from 82.
All the way back round.
Yeah, and I qualified the first race. In the second race, we finished 6th. And I made a point, so I become a hero again to AJS. I signed a piece of paper to drive for them the following year with a new car designed by this guy, Dutch guy, Chris van der I forgot his name now. Anyway, the car that Philippe Straff got hurt in Brazil.
Yes, the black and orange. Yes.
So I went to Brazil, exercised, got ready, got fit. In February, I realized no communications with the team, so I called them. They asked me to go to France. I went there, sat down in this bar at Nice airport. Funny enough, it was the same bar that Briatore fired me in Benetton a few years later, to tell me that I wouldn't be able to drive for them because they only have money to run one car team, and they had to run a French driver.
Which was Philippe.
Yeah. Oh. So that year, I had borrowed an air ticket to go to France to talk to them. I changed the air ticket to go to England. I found Gary Anderson, and then that story I mentioned earlier, and we won the championship with no money. I returned the car at the end of the year, I had done a deal with Rick Gorn. If I won the championship, I would return the car with no money. Nelson was the guarantor behind that car, which he didn't have to put any money at the end. And we won a Formula 3000 championship worth £1 million, maybe, with no money.
Wow. Just to touch on that 88. I mean, obviously it was rubbish luck, really bad luck with the AGS thing, and they could only run one car.
No, it wasn't bad luck. I got my break in Formula One.
Yes, it was it gave you that kind of foot back in, but in terms of
and then I won the Formula 3000 championship in a unique way. I mean the international championship in a unique way, and I got to Formula One through Ferrari. I was very lucky.
It's not a bad place to be, is it? Just to touch on the 88 season, though, I mean, people, especially the Brits over here, they seem to forget that you won that championship that year, because everyone over there focuses on the accident with Johnny Herbert and all that, because he's a British racer and everything like that. As I said off air, I was actually at that round of the F3000. I was 7 years old. And I believe it was Greg.
You make me feel old now.
Was it Wojtek? Moved out on you and put you into the
Greg Wojtek,
right in front of me. And I remember you getting out of the car. You were literally about 15 meters away from me as you got out of the car.
I was furious. I was furious. I mean,
even as a 7-year-old, I thought that was terrible. Wojtek, he just moved across, didn't he? He just put you in. He just put you in the barrier.
But it was a move I used to do with Formula Fords. You go on the outside, and then when the corner comes, you do a crossover.
Yeah.
But you do that with drivers that respect you. I didn't expect ever that he would pull that move on me.
Yeah.
He just hit my front wheel. Toof, off I went. And so I went on the left side of him, which wasn't the outside yet, not to go on the outside of paddock bend, but to cross over like we do in Formula Ford cars.
Yeah.
But because he didn't respect any driver, he just hit me like he hit Johnny Herbert and created all that accident.
Yeah.
A few laps later.
I mean, I must admit, it's not good that it happened at all, but it's good that a driver has said something about Mr. Wojtek, because all the fans that were around at the time were saying this guy's dangerous. About Wojtek.
It was extremely dangerous
because of what happened with you, and then obviously what happened with the accident with Johnny and all the other guys. He seemed to be right in the middle of it, both.
You see, at that race, I was not on the pace. And I would probably be involved in that accident or something like that, if I had not crashed before. But the reason I was on the pace was because Ron Salt came to Gary Anderson and said, "Look, he's now running a second driver in Brands Hatch in the same team, and we were not ready to run two cars yet." And he went to Gary Anderson and gave him a bollocking, or not giving enough attention to the other driver. So me and Gary, we walked out. We were not going to drive in that race. We just walked away. Because we got mad with Ron Salt. I mean, Gary got mad with Ron Salt, and I on his side.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Off we went until Ron Salt came to us and apologized to Gary. We came back. So there was a lot of things happening that weekend, which took all the balance away from us at that race.
Wow.
That's why I was fighting with Wojtek midfield.
Yeah, rather than where you'd been the rest of the season at the front. Just one last thing on that kind of weekend. Obviously, we all know what happened with Johnny in the accident and everything
It's a
else.
shame. Johnny was far the best British driver in that era. He was so natural talent.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And it was a shame. A shame.
I mean,
luckily, I had already beaten him by then, before the accident, because I was already leading the championship after Monza.
Yeah.
But it was a shame for him to have that such of injury in Brands Hatch.
And it was.
I used to love him. I used to like him so much and respect him as a driver.
Yeah, which is
for his natural talent.
Is a huge thing, and it's unfortunate when the accident happened. If it had happened a bit sooner or later, he'd have probably, because of the barrier came out on the bridge and everything. But where were you when the accident happened? I guess you were still at the circuit, and were you?
I don't remember. I don't remember where I was. I didn't get too involved with any of that.
Yeah, sure.
But I knew he was bad hurt, and it was Greg Fortek that created that. They started.
Yeah, and it was amazing that Johnny was able to return. Obviously, Benetton the following year, but that's another thing.
Luckily.
Yeah, it could have been a lot worse, for sure. No, appreciate that. Happier subject. You made it into F1 the following year with there was like Coloni and Coloni. I mean, we know Coloni weren't a top team, shall we say? I mean, did you have any expectations going into that year, or was it just on into F1?
Ferrari was behind us.
Yeah.
Ferrari was going to sponsor Coloni throughout the year. Nobody knew that, but I knew. We built the new car, which was from the same designer that built that first AGS. Trying to remember his name, Chris somebody. Chris Van. Anyway, he and we had all the support, and then Enzo died, Ferrari.
88, yeah.
And everything got cut. Everything that Marco Piccinini created, John Barnard, the new test driver for Ferrari, everybody got brushed out of the door. My contract got left behind.
Wow.
I remember going to see Fiorio, Mr. Hollywood, always with those glasses, playing like if he was in Hollywood. I went to see him. I said, well, you're my new boss. And he looked at me, say, I've got 5 minutes before my meeting. He said, well, what do you want to talk to me about? It's about my future. But since you only have 5 minutes, nice to meet you. And that was my meeting with Fiorio.
Wow. Which is nothing, is it? I mean, that's not a meeting. I've just seen a comment actually from a guy called.
I give you an example.
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
I give you an example before we get this comment. When Gerhard Berger got injured in Imola, I was to replace him under my contract. But because of Fiorio was now the new boss, he put Larini in my place, who was racing for another team. So he had to create a new scenario to get Larini from Osella. Put another driver at Larini's place, and didn't take me. Because his father, Larini's father, used to race for Fiorio in rally racing.
So it was all personal and Oh,
Politics.
yeah. There's always been politics, hasn't there? Oh, God. I mean,
I made it. I got there. I did the testing. I got money. I got to Formula One. I was able to make things happen no matter what.
Yeah. Just in a comment
What's the
here
comment?
from a guy called, I hope I pronounce this right. It's called Peter Wiste Araujo. He said he used to work with you at Coloni. He said the guy's name was Chris Vanderplane, was the guy who apparently designed the car.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks very
Thank you,
much.
Peter. Nice and easy. Excuse me. But yeah, and also like the Coloni car, it wasn't the most reliable or quick or anything. But you were in F1, and it was
No,
supposed to be.
the first car had a lot to be
Yeah.
developed. The new car was good. We're quick in Canada. If you look the warm up in Canada in the wet, I was in the top 3 or 4.
Yeah, I've got it on my yeah.
So that car was good, but the wheel came off. And then we run out of money. Coloni didn't have money to go testing or rebuild the engine, pay for tires. So we could hardly come out of pre-qualifying because we didn't have money to run.
Yeah, there's no development possible or anything like that, I guess, and that was it.
That was it.
Yeah.
I still got paid from Ferrari, but that was as far as it went.
So I guess at the end of the year, the Coloni was done, and they're looking for a.
And they did not take my option to drive for Ferrari either.
So much politics, isn't it? Always politics. Politics everywhere.
It's okay.
But it's all part of the game, isn't it? The following year, you went to like Eurobrunn. Now, I remember Eurobrunn. I went to the British Grand Prix in '88. I've got a picture of me standing there. I think it was Oscar Larari's Eurobrunn, and it was the first F1 car that I was really got up close to. So I've always got a soft spot. I've always loved Eurobrunn for that reason. But again, it was a similar situation. The car with the, I guess with the finances and the pace and everything, it just wasn't quite there, was it?
Well, Eurobrunn was a little different game. They had an English design group led by George Wright, if I'm not wrong, George Wright. George was quite good, had some good ideas. The car wasn't bad, but some strange things happened. Van der Green to come and be my engineer sometimes whenever he could. In Brazil, so we went to Phoenix. We qualified the car, I think 15th or something. We did exceptionally well in the straight course. Got to Brazil, pre-qualifying. It's wet, drying out. And I think I was like almost 2 seconds faster than the second guy in pre-qualifying. And Case Van der Green told Pavanello, said, look, we've got to bring him in for fuel. Oh, he's doing so well. Let him do another lap. Why are they discussing? And Case is trying to show this old man that if I didn't have fuel to do another lap.
Yeah.
And while they fighting, I went past.
Right. Okay.
And I run out of petrol down the bottom of the lake. And the circuit dried off a little bit more. And all the efforts I was doing was all out of the door, and I did not pass pre-qualifying because this guy would not put extra gas, put fuel in my car or petrol in the car to finish the session.
Of all the reasons,
yeah,
not have petrol in the car.
He on purpose did not let me come in. to put petrol in the car for the second half of the session, the pre-qualifying session. So
Jeez.
it was strange, but I didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
But fast forwarding to the last race in Jerez de la Frontera,
Yeah.
the last race in Europe, after other silly things happened throughout the year, like qualifying with race tires rather than qualifiers,
Okay.
and shock absorbers that's supposed to be good and they had no oil in it, because they were rebuilt by Case, but then Case didn't show up for that race, and then there was a shock with no oil. Things like that happen. I went to Jerez de la Frontera. I did my first run, not as quick, not quick enough to pass pre-qualifying. And then my second run was extremely quick, 3/10 quicker. I went on the curb at that last corner where Donnelly had his accident.
Yeah.
On the limit everywhere, really pushing. I finished the lap and ran out of gas, ran out of petrol, which is in those days it was not a problem, you know. So walked back to the pits, and I knew I had done this 3/10 quicker from the dashboard in my car, but I didn't know if I had passed pre-qualifying. I come to the pits. That is the owner of my team, Mr. Pavanello, the old man, smiling at me. So straight away inside of my brains, I say, I passed pre-qualifying. Yeah. Great. When I get close to Pavanello, he says, Roberto, by 1/10, you out. But he's smiling.
He's happy.
Happy. So I threw my helmet to the side and I jumped at him to hit him. His son saw it quick enough and he grabbed me.
Rugby tackle.
And he pushed me to the side. He tackled me and pushed me to the side and said, look, come down. I said, why? Look at your father. He's happy that I did not qualify. Hang on, Roberto, sit down. Come down and I will explain to you. Each time you pass pre-qualify, our family has money issues. Because in our team is me and my wife, my brother, my sister and her husband, my father and mother. They live out of this money. And if you pass pre-qualify, we have to spend 2 engine rebuilds and extra sets of tires. The money that Broom sends to us is the same, whether you pass pre-qualify or not.
So it's almost not worth passing pre-qualifying.
Because we use the same engine for Grand Prix and just 2 sets of tires each time. I said, no. You tell me that now?
After almost a whole season.
Yeah. Well, there's only 2 races left. So I went back home to Monaco and talked to my wife. I said, look, gotta go to England before the teams go to Japan. Once they go on holidays after the last 2 races, there's only 1 seat available at Brabant. If I don't get that now, I'm done.
Yeah.
So I went, called Herbert Blesch, talked to him to go and see him about next year, and say, okay, yeah, still have a seat, love to talk to you. Say, okay, I'll go there tomorrow.
Right.
And that's Thursday, a week before the Japanese Grand Prix. Called him on Thursday morning before leaving Monaco to go to England. He suggested that I came the day after because he got busy.
Right.
And he couldn't see me. So Friday, being a good Brazilian, and realized that if I called him, he might postpone it again. I flew out instead of calling him. Got to Heathrow, called her, who was running Brabham at the time.
Yeah.
And he said, Roberto. I say, hi, Herbie, I'm Heathrow. Came to see you. Roberto, you flew without telling me. You're supposed to call me. I got busy again. And I might not be able to see you. I said, come on, Herbie. Oh, okay, since you're here, come at 5 o'clock and I'll give you 10 minutes before going home. I said, okay. That's 10 o'clock in the morning. I got my phone card. It was the thing to have at those days to call people in England. So I bought a bigger phone card and sat down in the phone there at Heathrow and start calling people. I called Ron Toronak. I then called Moto, the president of Honda that was in England at the time. I called Gary Anderson. And then we talked a lot about everything and people that I really respect, all engineers that I respect. Then I called John Barnard, who I had worked with at Ferrari, developing the semi-automatic gearbox. John that year asked me to do one test for him at Benetton, a straight line test in a circuit in France. Mm-hmm. And I called him and said, oh, Roberto, what are you doing? I said, oh, here, Heathrow. Came to see Herbie Blash. Well, what are you doing? I said, I'm looking for a job for next year. Again? Well, story of my life, John. So here I am. Oh, Roberto, you're going to be down the road from me. I'm in Godalming. Just, just a little away from... I have the mock-up for next year's car. Since you're here, my team already, the race team already flew to Japan. I'm working on this mock-up, and I need the driver to tell me if the steering wheel, the gear shift lever, and the dashboard, the dash clocks or gauges are in the right place. Could you do that for me so I wouldn't have to call my drivers from Europe to come here? Say, Joe, if you buy me a cup of tea and biscuits, the digestive biscuits with chocolate, I'll come and do this for you.
Now, there's a sign that you spent time in England.
So you say, no worries, I'll get those biscuits. They'll be here when you arrive. Please make sure you come. I'll be there. So I actually went to London to buy a little TV multi-system that only sells in England. So my girls could watch, my girl could watch Disney videos in Monaco. And then I went to my meeting. It didn't last long. Herbie was very pleased to see me. We talked a little bit, but didn't get really anywhere other than nice talk. But John Barnard's secretary calls Brabham, and she wanted to talk to me, and she wanted to make sure I was going to make to the Godalming factory, Benetton factory, before the day was over. So I'll definitely be there, maybe in half an hour. So that was strange. So I went to the Benetton factory, parked on the outside. John Barnard picks me up on the car outside because he saw me from his office. He wanted to get a breath of fresh air, so he went outside. I didn't know anything what was happening. So we go in, sit on his office. The phone is off the hook. Everybody calling him. The first phone call was from Cronenfurst, the head of Ford Motorsport in America and spent some time talking to Joe in front of me. And the name of Michael Andretti came about a couple of times. That phone call was finished. Andrea de Cesaris calls, and he spent another 10 minutes with him. And then he puts the phone down and unplugs it. And he looked at me and said, Roberto, at 2 o'clock this afternoon, Alessandro Nannini had a helicopter crash, lost his arm. They're trying to sew it back on as we speak. It's a very complicated process. And we're here, as you can see, we need to find a second driver basis. Everybody's calling after the accident. You're the only driver that called me not to ask for a drive, but before the accident, and you came here to help me with something that I need. Would you like to drive?
Wow.
And I say, that's what I say. Wow. I say, Joe, I'm still under contract to this shit team that doesn't want to go racing. I say, well, do you want to call them? I say, well, what about that cup of tea and biscuits? I think it's time for that.
Wow.
So he says to me, Roberto, I need to go and see Briatore. He's got a list of 3 drivers that he wants. I got 4 on my neck to put in the car.
Sure.
I can hold those guys off for an hour. Go and do the mock-up for me. Diane, an engineer, well, one of my best, take you a tea and biscuits and talk to you about the car. Once you're finished, you decide. If you want, you can drive. So an hour later, come back, let's do it. He turned the phone to me, say, call your team. So I called Brun in Switzerland, not Pavanello. And the secretary, as it happened, was looking for me, but she was chasing me in Monaco because they had a meeting in that afternoon that I wasn't aware of, that they've decided they didn't have money to go to Japan or Australia. And they decided to stop the team then in that afternoon.
It was almost like it was meant to happen, you know. It was, wow.
It was definitely meant to happen.
That's crazy. On the same day. So obviously when you were flying out, Eurobrum was saying, that's it, no more. Wow. I bet you couldn't believe that everything had fallen the way it had done. Because obviously Benetton, as we know, we're a top team.
They were top 6. They top the top. There was Ferrari, McLaren, Williams, and Benetton. Top 4.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. That's quite a jump from Eurobrun. No disrespect to Eurobrun, but that's quite a step up the grid, isn't it?
Well, there was no pre-qualifying with Benetton.
Oh yeah, yeah. Didn't have to do any work on the front. But
then, if you want to know a little bit more how that was meant to be, I'll tell you a little story further.
Yeah, yeah.
Got to Japan. Well, once they found out I was driving for Benetton, they tried to put the contract on the table, and they wanted $30,000 to release me.
I heard about this. Yeah, did that really happen?
So Jones said, "No way. They're just bluffing. They're not gonna go." And then Jones says to me, "Go and do your suit. They're gonna open the factory, the Sparkle factory near Turin, Sunday for you." This was Saturday. We made the seat in the morning, and I flew to Monaco. And then I've learned about the $30,000 then. The guy actually came back from that meeting to England Humblestoke, I think was his name, Rumblestoke, um, Chris Humblestone. Uh, he's supposed to bring me a release letter, and I'm driving him as I arrive at Heathrow. Before I returned my car and flew out, I took him to his road car and hoping there would be a letter there for me. And he says to me, "Oh, Roberto," avoiding the conversation. Eventually, I said, "Where's my letter?" He said, "Well, he wants $30,000." I said, "What?" So I pulled a handbrake, driving on the two-way road from airport to Staines, and I stopped the car in the middle of nowhere, hit the curb. I say, "Get the fuck out of my car! You, you, you just part of it as everybody. You should have told me that before already. Um, no way I'm gonna leave this car in the middle of nowhere here." So I remember his bag was in the boot. So I went to the boot, got his bag, and threw out on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. While he jumped out of the car to get his bags, I took off and left him there.
Wow.
And I told John. John said, "Look, it's a bluff. Go and do your suit. They're waiting for you tomorrow at Sparkle on Sunday. Fly the first flight out you can after you get your suit. We'll pay for everything. We'll reimburse you for everything, and just be there."
Wow.
So, but just in case, ask Martin Blundell to be there. Just in case they show up and make you drive. So got there, called the team on Thursday. The team never left Milan, so I knew I was free to drive. And went to the first practice. First quick lap, I brake. I say, "This is not where I need to brake." I back out, back off the brakes, back on the throttle, and I braked maybe almost 50 meters later.
Because of the difference in the car.
So
The
then
car was
I
that different.
got used to the car. Everything was fine, but did a half a decent time on that first day. Got to the hotel. I was knackered, complete knackered.
I'll bet.
Called my friend in Brazil who was a karate expert, and I asked him, "What can I do to get my fitness in shape for the next 2 days?" And he said, "Well, in the Bible, on Psalm 23. I said, "Come on, Manel. I'm calling you for physical strength, not for spiritual
Not
strength."
for.
He said, "Roberto, listen to what I'm saying. Open the Bible and read Psalm 23. It's going to help you." Explain, Manel. He said, "Oh, when I was at school and I need to go through 3 days and nights without sleeping because exams, that psalm gave me the strength I needed. And we're going to pray for you over here." So every hotel has a Bible. So I read the Bible on Psalm 23. And next day, I was even tired, more tired than I was in the first day. Got to the Grand Prix. I think I did a half a second slower than Nelson qualifying. My first luck was that my car had a hiccup at the happen, and I radio in, and they say, "Okay, you coming to the pits and you jumping on the T car." I say, "Hang on, the T car is set up for Nelson. I don't think we have time to put my settings in it, my brake pedal settings and seat. And no, you're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. Come in, even if you have to start last. Okay. So my mechanics did a great job. They were fantastic. They got me on the grid, and I started with a car that was set up by Nelson. That was my first luck. Nelson came to me and said, look, I don't know where he was trying to get me on the same page as him, so I wouldn't do anything contrary to what he was doing, or if he was really trying to help me. But he said to me, I'm going to get those people because I'm starting with harder tires and no pit stop. I'm going to drive the half of the race like an old woman. And when everybody stops for this pit stop, I'm going to get going. I said, Nelson, if you're doing that, I'm following you. And I did that. That was very important. First corner. Gerhard Berger now is the leader of the race, followed by Nigel, Nelson, and myself after a good start. Gerhard slips in the second lap on the water left from Prost and Senna.
Yeah.
We saw that, so we got by without spinning because we saw him spinning off. So we all got through. Halfway in the race, Nigel comes to the pits, coming out of the pits like he always does, breaks the drive shaft.
Yeah.
And it's Nelson me. So we're cruising, and then halfway in the race, Nelson started pushing. I couldn't keep his pace.
Really?
He started to pull away, and I started to have to drive fast. I couldn't keep his pace. And I got tired, and I lost breath, and I got tired, and I lost breath. I started losing concentration. I almost spun. I almost went off. And then the song came to my mind. 2 corners later, that strength that hits the marathon runners, which is a shot of not adrenaline, it's a shot of endorphin.
Right.
Came to me, hit me, and I got alert, sharp again, and I had all the strength to go all the way to the end.
That's incredible. Goodness me.
I know.
I have to give it a read.
I know.
I might have to read that.
You need to believe, though.
Well, of course.
It's about believing.
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. And there's all these little things that people, fans don't normally know, and things like that. And as we know, I mean, you came first and second, and from where you had been 2 races earlier, 2 weeks earlier or whenever it was in Spain, where you were just angry and fed up and annoyed and to being standing
I related
on a podium.
I related what happened at that race, everything that I believe was meant to be, because that was my last chance of something happening in Formula One for me, because I was done in Formula One.
Yeah.
Nobody would hire me after. In 2 years, I had only qualified 6 times.
Right. Yeah.
4 with Coloni and 2 with Eurobroom. So my career was over.
Yeah.
So I related that to back in '88, when my wife was pregnant, 87, 88. And the doctor advised us to have an abortion because IUD, and it could be born with that piece of metal in her eye, in her face, somewhere in her body. And I said, no way in the world we're going to do that. She's going to be born no matter what.
Good.
And she was born perfectly fine, with no problems whatsoever. And
So I
related what God did to me as a sort of, I'm not sure what to say, but as a payback to what, for not following the doctor's instructions.
Yeah.
For my daughter.
Having the faith. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
I know that it's a powerful thing, isn't it?
I truly believe in all of that.
Absolutely. Well, when that kind of thing happens, why wouldn't you? You know, I mean, it's wow. That is amazing, and it feels almost like a thank you, almost for your faith.
Just to prove you wrong, when you said I was lucky, I was unlucky. Yeah. I was never unlucky. I've been the luckiest man, because despite everything against me, I made it to the top.
You still got there. Yeah. Wow. I mean, I'm just to finish up on that race, on that race in Japan. I mean, it must have been an incredibly emotional time. You know, you finished second, you're on the podium. I mean, you must have thought, I'm standing up here and I've done it. I mean, it must have felt incredible.
You know what happened? Soon after I left the podium, the endorphin went away.
Right.
And at the driver's press conference, I couldn't stand up anymore. I had to sit down for a long time.
Oh, fantastic! And I mean, and also to have been there with Nelson, who had obviously won the race, and he'd helped you so much, and he'd been there for you. It must have meant an awful lot to have him there as well.
You see, it meant a lot, and that's why I cried so much. It was because somehow God gave me the opportunity to have that result. Yeah. And by doing so, it was the first time that Benetton finished first and second. Yeah. It was like, thank you, Nelson, with no words for what he believed in me in the first year of my career back in '79. It
was almost like it came around. It was
meant to be
another circle.
It was like meant to be.
Yeah. And I'm sure you already know this, but this is a useless bit of Formula One trivia, because obviously it was Nelson, you, and Aguri Suzuki, wasn't it, on the podium?
Yeah.
That's the last podium still that didn't feature a European driver.
Really? I didn't know that.
That was there you go. That is, and every time a race ends, I go, that's another one, because obviously we got Max and all these European. But yeah, that was the first non-European F1 podium, and it was great for Aguri Suzuki because he had all the Honda guys with him, and yeah,
it's still the last first and second for two Brazilian drivers in Formula One.
It is, yeah. Even with Ayrton and Nelson driving further on, you'd think maybe it happened again, but obviously Nelson was at Lotus.
Never being first and second.
Wow, we need to change that soon. We need to get some more Brazilians on the grid. But obviously that led into the following year, the full season with Benetton, and I get, you had a contract for the full year, I assume. And the season was going pretty well, and I think I'm going to ask you. This all comes down to Spa later on in the year, which I'm sure you've spoken about 1,000 times and are sick of it. But that Schumacher chap came along with Jordan and did that. What then happened? I've always been I've always been interested in this because obviously you had the drive, you were doing well with Benetton, with Nelson and everything. What happened with Michael and with Flavio and all that? I mean, because
It wasn't Flavio.
I don't think
It
there was
was.
anyone in
It
F1 that
wasn't Flavio.
was it not?
No, it was the other guy, an English guy, Walkinshaw.
Oh, Tom Walkinshaw was it? I didn't
Mm.
know that. I didn't.
In '88, he asked me to drive for Jaguar at. He asked me to drive. Um, I think it was '88 because I was doing Formula 3000. Le Mans.
Yeah.
I went to test a Silverstone for him, and he put me in the car with Guy Edwards, I believe, if I'm not
Oh yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
With no at Silverstone, so ran a Le Mans. Martin Blundell, who I used to compete against in Formula 3 and few occasions beat him, was driving 3 seconds faster on the Silverstone setup car for Jaguar testing. And I say, Tom, can I drive that car? You know, I'm young. I knew I was as good as Martin in Formula 3, and he wouldn't let me drive that car. And for a young driver that's doing really well and full of energy, that wants to go fast, being how you call it, not being allowed to perform at its best scenario, got me really angry.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I did the testing with the Le Mans setup car. Finished the testing. I supposed to go and meet Tom Walkinshaw in his motorhome, whatever it was there, or trailer. Got there. I remember him sitting in this thing and this desk and gave me the contract. It was like a book. And say, please sign. Driving a Le Mans with me. I look at him. I say, thank you, but no thank you. And I pushed the contract back. And I stood up and I was ready to leave. He said, well, why are you leaving like that? I say, because you did not allow me to drive the Silverstone setup car that Martin Blundell was going really well with it. You should have let me do at least a few laps in that car. Turn around and left. So he was really, really pissed with me. I didn't care about him. Except a few years later, he bought into Benetton and he fired me. First thing he did.
And I guess it was, apologies. And I guess that was obviously on the back of Spa and Michael and all that. And I guess he just wanted Michael in the seat. And
well, no.
Or I
Jordan had the agreement. Jordan had a letter of intention. Jordan found him. Jordan gave him the opportunity.
Yeah, with Bertrand Gachot.
But then Mercedes was behind him. Some money for whoever run him. So with the situation with Tom, and Tom brought into the team to bring new interest.
Right.
So they went after Schumacher and they sold my seat.
I mean, from a business point of view, you can see what he was brought in to do, but I remember everyone.
They built a new factory. They built a new factory with that money.
Wow. I don't even know what to say. I mean, I'm just. I mean, I'm just wondering what's going through your head at this time. I mean, obviously you've gone through all this stuff with the Cologne and the Eurobahn and and then all of a sudden they just sell your seat out from underneath you.
I was,
Gee.
see, when I, it would be okay if I had all the experience behind me in Formula One, but I didn't. So they were, a young shot comes up with lots of money from Mercedes. Mercedes was investing in three different drivers at the time. He was one of them, investing in one team and one engine. And when everything came together, it would be called Mercedes. And if you look, it took Mercedes a long time to win with a German driver. And the beginning of it was in 81.
Wow. That's amazing. That is amazing. And wow. I'm gobsmacked. But I mean, obviously, so you're then out of a drive, obviously, but you ended up racing for Jordan for 2 races.
Yeah. I called Wayne Briatore came to meet me at Nice Airport. I thought he was going to sign me up for the following year.
Really?
Because there were contracts.
Sure.
Before Monza. And then he sat in this desk, in this coffee shop, Nice Airport. It was Wednesday before the Grand Prix. Tuesday or Wednesday, I don't remember. One of the two. Before the Monza Grand Prix. He flew his private jet to Nice to talk to me. I thought, okay, new contract showing up, Why gonna fly just to come and see me? We sat in this table at the coffee shop. He's looking down. And he never looked in my face 1 second. And he, looking down to his legs, he tells me that they need to run this other driver, new driver. There's a lot of money involved, and they had to do that. There's no way around it. I say, well, is that the driver coming from Jordan? Yeah. So, well, did you talk to Jordan to put drive with Gary Anderson? I have no problem with that. No, we having some kind of disagreement with Eddie and his team because they want to keep that driver.
Right.
So we're having disagreements with him, so we couldn't do that. And he's looking down, never looking in my face.
Never. Yeah.
And I said, well, I'll go and call Eddie, and if he allows me to drive, I have no problem. Oh, by the way, before you go, so I stood up, ready to go. Before you go, he handed me those 2 pieces of paper. And in those 2 pieces of paper made me mad. Because after finish 4th in Spa, after developing that gearbox to be developed and stop breaking down, and doing the fastest lap of the race, on that letter, the only clause on the contract they could hit me with to get me out of the contract was fitness. And he said, you're not fit to drive, mentally or physically fit to drive. And he hit me with that clause.
Wow.
Which that wasn't fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that got me mad.
Because it obviously wasn't the case, was it? I mean, yeah.
I had one. That's all it was. So they
Wow.
hit me. They hit me with that, and I thought it wasn't fair. I got really mad. When I got home and I read that piece of paper, um, I I called Jordan, and Jordan went off the roof. No way in the world! That driver's mine. I him. There's a lot of money behind him. I want that. I said, sorry, Eddie. I just wanted to ask if I could drive for you. Sorry.
Oh, oh.
Sorry. Yeah.
Goodness me.
And there's no way in the world I'm going to let him go. I said, okay, fine, no problem.
It wasn't
So
down to you. Yeah.
my next choice was to call a lawyer and see what my options were. And I called a lawyer in Italy who I knew from Ferrari. And he took to a friend of his in Monza, the situation. And the judge the next day sent a letter that I was the only driver to drive at that Grand Prix in that car. So we sat down and talked, and we come to an agreement out of court. But I had a leverage now to ask for something.
Gee.
And then somebody that I don't want to say the name calls me at 3 o'clock in the morning at the hotel, because they were dealing with this until 3 o'clock in the morning. Says, look, we're all here. I say, what are you doing there? You know, it happens. And then he says to me, look, if you don't go the way here, if you don't accept the deal, Schumacher is not going to drive, but when they get to England, they're going to blame you for that. So I advise you to take this deal. And I said, well, if you're saying that, I'll take your word for it. And just could you please get them to pay the lawyers? And he agreed to it, and we settled.
Wow. Wow.
And then I got a phone call 10 minutes later from Eddie Jordan.
And he's not shouting and screaming this time, huh?
No. Roberto, I'm glad that you've done a deal, but I need a driver for the weekend. I say, well, Eddie, I can drive for you, but I'm a little tired. And maybe tomorrow I'm not going to be very good, but by the weekend I'll be okay. $60,000. So I dropped the phone on him. I just dropped the phone on his face when I heard he wanted the same reaction I had with that Eurobroom guy asking for $30,000. I had with Eddie, but this was over the phone.
Wow.
I told him what I thought about it, and I dropped the phone on him. And then he calls again. I say, Eddie, I'm not paying you to drive.
Yeah.
I asked you before. Oh, Roberto, I need a driver. I say, okay, I'll drive for you for free. Oh, what about $50,000? I dropped the phone on him again. And then eventually he calls and says, Roberto, don't drop the phone, please. I say, okay, do not talk about money. I do not want to hear from your mouth money. Okay. But Roberto, I said, if you need, it's your problem, not mine. My personal money to drive for you. I never done that in my life.
Find it somewhere else.
And then he said, well, I have no choice. I'll take you. I say, okay, now we're talking. And
Good.
then I say, Eddie, if you take me and I find a sponsor later, not my money, I will pass it on to you. And then he allowed me to drive Monza and Portugal. And my friend Leia, a lady that follows Formula One with her husband that is on a wheelchair for many years, she fought for me in Portugal and found a sponsor from Denning. And I passed that sponsor to Eddie after I drove for him.
Wow.
He said to me, Roberto, you're the only driver that ever paid after the fact.
But you're doing things
I'm a
the right
man
way.
of,
You know, doing things the way they should be done. Which,
and I got him, I think, $100,000 from this sponsor.
wow.
Without any
Yeah,
commitment.
it was just a
No
vocal,
commitment.
just word. A gentleman's
Yeah.
word, isn't it? It's called, yeah. Wow.
Yes.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. Excellent. I mean, just very quickly, I mean, that Jordan, I mean, among the fans of F1, it's seen as one of the best, one of the best looking F1 cars ever. Just quickly, what was it like?
Gary, I'm such a fan of Gary. Me and Gary, we like engineer driver like this. And I loved the work he done. I would have loved to have driven for him. It was only 2 races.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, because
Yeah.
as you know, so you loved it, but I mean, it's
He built that car through friends in England, like Richard. I think Richard Barnes, if I'm not wrong, helped him to build that car, and just because Gary, so many people around that area to work for him, he built that car away from the factory through different shops, different people, and he come up with that very competitive car out of his mind, like he did with the Anson car in the past.
amazing.
Gary built an Anson car that I remember Ron Tarnack telling me, "Oh, I have to work harder because somebody came up with a car that's well advanced than my route cars in Formula 3." And that was the Anson car by Gary Anderson.
Yeah, it was so far ahead of its time almost. And,
It was.
yeah, and obviously that Jordan's a terrific machine.
It's a shame that Eddie has won Gary out of Formula One somehow.
Yeah,
because Gary deserved to be there all the way to the end.
He's the kind of guy that needs to be in F1 almost. He's that kind of a chap.
He had enough of it.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
I think.
Yeah, sure. And obviously that.
Oh, you made me remember. You made me remember a situation that we went testing that year. The only 2 tests we did the only one of the 3 tests we done in the full season in '88 in Formula 3000, and we got to Monza, and I went out and I did a couple of laps, and I come in, I jump out of the car in the morning, and Gary's looking at me. I'm taking my helmet out, and he said, "What's happening here?" I said, "Well, you got to change the chrono wheel pinion bearing. And if you change," he said, "What? How'd you know that?" I said, "Well, you just have to change, Gary. And if you hurry up, we'll get back out in the afternoon." So what are you talking about? I said, "You just need to change that." And I wouldn't tell him anymore. So he got mad at me. He got really mad. And then he started changing opening the gearbox. And sure enough, he went to the pinion and tuck, it was moving. And he said, "Roberto, you gotta tell me how you knew this." I said, "Gary, it's very easy. You sit on the car, you drive out, you go to shift gear. As you back off to change gears, the whole the gearbox moves, also the gear lever moves.
Right.
And
So
I've done a couple of days in Formula Atlantic, so I know. He couldn't believe it.
Wow. He was thinking,
He just couldn't.
brilliant.
So me and Gary were like this.
Yeah. No, great stuff. Great stuff. I mean, I'm just wary of the time. We're going to keep people too late. I don't want to keep anyone too late, but you ended that year with one race at Minardi after Mr. Morbidelli went to Ferrari race. And that actually means that you drove three of my favorite looking F1 cars ever. That Minardi was a great looking thing. How was it? What was it like working with Minardi? Because I think they're everyone's favorite cult team. Everyone loves Minardi.
I love Giancarlo. He's a fantastic person. Everybody in his team, I loved it. It was great working for him, except the car was too small for me.
Right.
You know, with that accident I had in Brazil in the motorcycle that spent a year, my ankle doesn't move.
Right.
So for me to come off the brake and go on the throttle, I have to have room.
Right.
Because I don't move my ankle. So I have to move my whole leg.
Right.
And that car was built for Martini.
Right. He's a bit, yes.
He's short on the legs.
Yes.
He's short on the legs, so I couldn't move. So I couldn't qualify that car.
Yeah.
And then I say, last session, I went to Giancarlo. I say, Giancarlo, there's only one way I can qualify this car. Would you let me do it? He said, Roberto, whatever you want. I said, okay. So I went to the engineer and I talked to him, and he moved the pedals to the front of the car. That became illegal.
Oh, ahead of the axle, the head of the, yeah.
Yes. So he moved everything ahead of the axle in order for me to be able to, and then I qualified the last session.
Excellent. Because I was in Adelaide, was it? Australia?
Yeah. And then they ran out that race.
Yeah.
Stopped earlier.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because it was.
I raced. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, we could talk again. There's so much to cover, but one thing I want to talk about is, I believe, your next move in F1. I've spoken with Perry McCarthy and I've spoken with Alex Caffey about Andrea Moda, and they can't talk about the team without smiling, sort of laughing. The whole thing was interesting, wasn't it?
Perry, about Andrea Moda, you started the wrong way, because Perry was never meant to race that car.
Yes, it was Jethro.
He was just there, not so the team wouldn't pay a fine.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Perry didn't see it that way. But I knew it was not possible for that team to run two cars, ever. It was hard enough to run one car.
Yeah.
So it was impossible to run two cars. And I knew that. All the mechanics were my friends from Goloni. The engineer there was a great friend of mine, one of the engineers. And initially, all came about because my friend who got my apartment, who was the owner of the real estate agent that did all the drivers in Monaco, he helped me to get a good apartment there for very little money, because he knew I wasn't the richest guy around and I needed some help. He also knew Caffey. He knew what Caffey didn't want. He called me in Brazil and he said, Roberto, this is the situation. The team needs a driver in Brazil just to do 3 laps in the car, so they don't get kicked out of Formula One. So I say, well, I'm in Brazil. How much are they willing to pay? Say, I don't know, he says. I said, well, get them to pay me $15,000 cash on my arrival. If the money is not in the envelope, cash on my arrival, I'm gone.
Wow.
And that was my deal with Andrea Moda.
Again,
So
things that
I
wouldn't
got,
happen today.
I arrived in Interlagos,
Wow.
met this very playboy-looking guy, and the first thing he did was hand me this envelope. I say, well, very nice to meet you. What what's my job? I say to him. and
Wow.
and
Brilliant.
then we did that. We did the 3 laps with a diff that was locked. Sometimes to turn into the last corner before the straight, I had to
Mhm.
press the clutch, turn and let the clutch go. So it would uh, break the rear wheels off. So we could
Right.
turn and go up the straight.
You could get the car. Wow. Goodness me.
I did 3 laps like that.
Wow. I- it just, I mean, obviously, it just wouldn't, I mean, in like today's terms, it wouldn't be allowed now, that whole situation. But you weren't there and you did it and you drove the car. And,
Yeah. Then the car got
and
approved by FIA, so we had eventually they got a car from Simtech, which was really well designed,
mm,
but never finished.
yeah.
When we got to Barcelona, or I think it was Barcelona, the engineer comes to me and said, Roberto, the rear wheels, I want you to drive out of the pits and stop as soon as the back straight starts. I don't want you to go fast on the back straight or anywhere on the circuit. Why? Come here. And then he shows me this crack on the poster of the rear wing about this long. Say, that's why. So, okay. So I still drove back to the pits. I would not stop on the circuit
Yeah.
and came out of the car. People say, what happened? I say, oh, there's something wrong with the car. That's all I said. And then that was Barcelona. And then what I did was I sat down with Hayden Burville, one of the engineers, and all the mechanics, and I say to them, I say, look, this car is not bad because we had gone testing somewhere. If we all put some effort in making the car one time being all together, we can do well.
Right.
So we did that for Imola in one car, not in 2 cars. And that car in Imola had springs from Benetton and shocks from Ferrari or the other way around. I think because I had good friends everywhere. And we found the right springs through some engineers that I talked to. And we got the right springs. We put the shocks. I think the shocks were from Benetton and the springs from Ferrari. And I found a rear wing from somebody else that I don't want to say the name. We put this car together, and in Imola we could have qualified already, but our front left wheel bearing got seized in pre-qualifying, and we had to quit. Fixed that for Monaco. We went to a circuit in what's the name? South of Italy. I think it was Bari,
Okay.
maybe. Uh, Little place, first, second, third gear in Formula One. First, second, third. That's all. But I was able to learn that the car needed some more steering to be able to turn. And we freed the diff. We did those 2 things and we put the right height, like for Monaco. and that was enough for the car to be quick at Monaco.
Wow.
And then I did something. I'm not too sure I'm willing. I, I want to say this, but I'll tell you this
Okay.
story. Um, um, in those days, petrol was very important. All the top teams had petrol. There was rocket
Yeah.
petrol.
Yeah.
But we didn't. So I went to a lady called Valerie, and she was the second person at Elf.
Right.
And Valerie loved me because she was a little fat, and I used to grab her from the back and sniff her neck, and she would go, "Oh, it's funny." Every time I saw her, I would grab her from the back and surprise her with this sniff in her neck. And she loved it at the end of the day. And I went to her in Monaco and said, "Look, I need your help. I just need 15 liters, 15, 20 liters of this fuel so we can have a half a chance against everybody else that have this fuel." "Oh, Roberto, we can't do that. It's all contract." So come on, Valerie. Nobody will know. So she took me to her boss, and he agreed to it.
Wow.
And he gave me a break. Yeah. And he said, "Roberto, bring the cans. See that place there? He showed me somewhere. Put it there. Walk away. Once you see they're gone and come back, go and pick them up yourself." Okay. So we did all that. 7 o'clock in the evening. Took the fuel to up the top there. In the morning, we put the fuel. It helped a little bit more, and we had a car that was running well and qualified.
Yeah.
I mean, pre-qualified.
Yeah.
And the most amazing scene I have in my mind, driving into the pits, and every single person in every team that was there that early clapping at me outside of the garages.
Fantastic.
That scene does not leave my head, and is one of the sensations that it will die with me.
Yeah.
And
Just
it's those few occasions that I succeed that it's makes me feel that everything was worthwhile doing it.
that's a wonderful thing to hear. I mean, something that some people might see as something quite small. I mean, I actually, when I announced that you were going to come on and have a chat, I put in the announcement saying qualifying that car in Monaco was one of the most incredible things I've seen in Formula One. I've been following F1 since about 1986. It was absolutely fantastic. And I remember in Autosport or some magazine, and it showed you coming down the pit lane and everyone out applauding, and it's like stuck in my head as a picture. So for you, it must be 100 times bigger and better.
That was pre-qualifying, and then
Incredible.
qualifying come on. In Monaco, there's a couple of days, so we couldn't do a lot of running there. Um, we had That was the first miracle, pre-qualifying. The second miracle was qualifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we didn't have the fuel left anymore.
Right.
The fuel was gone. Um, so last session in qualifying, I got very soon, very early, and I think I put when I drove into the pits, I was 11th, and then that was a very good time for that car, and I don't know if you know, but we could only do 4 laps before it overheated. But the tires would only warm after 6 laps because we didn't have the best warmers on the tires. Okay.
Right. So you were kind of stuck between the.
So I had to do 2 laps, stop, and then do 4 laps. We did more or less something like that, or I slowed down. I did something more or less like that.
Wow.
So I got one lap out of that car earlier on, coming to the pits to cool it. Exhaust is broken. So they start changing it. I gave them my gloves because nobody had gloves to change the exhaust. They're hot. And they're changing. I'm sitting in the car. And then time going by, and they fixed it. 15 minutes to go. I told Hayden, I said, look, might as well put the other set of tires because it's only another. So they tried to change the front tires. One of the wheels did not come off. And the reason for that is there were some new nuts. And between the English mechanics and the Italian mechanics, the English mechanics put in the bag 2 brown new nuts and they say, do not use. The Italian mechanics look at those 2 brown new nuts and they say, oh, those need to be in the car, they're brown new. But they had a different angle. They had the wrong angle.
Oh, okay.
So they put in the car, one of the wheels wouldn't come off. So I said, leave that wheel on, change the other 3. And I waited until they trying to start the engine. And the prime pump, outside prime pump, quit. And we couldn't. The lap time that got me on the grid for Monaco race, because we still had to put, I think, 4 cars out of the grid to be able to qualify.
Right. Yeah.
Was the lap I did earlier on in the session.
The early
and that lap sticked all the way to the end, although Monaco goes quicker each lap.
Yeah, it was still good enough to.
Although last on the grid. So had I been able to do another lap at the late stages, most likely I would qualify further forward.
Wow. So, so obviously the car wasn't as bad as it perhaps looks to people looking back at the qualifying and things like that.
We did a good job to put things together, borrowing parts from other teams.
Well, you do what you need to do.
I went myself to borrow it.
Wow.
And that's something that, unfortunately, Perry wasn't aware and it wasn't part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
So that's why you heard him before. You haven't heard the right story yet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like Perry did actually say, "Oh, I was in at the last minute, and it kind of happened and everything." But I still maintain that Monaco weekend was one of the most amazing things I've seen in F1, and it's great to hear about it. It's absolutely
a couple of miracles happened there. And then John Judge comes to me. Say, Roberto, what are you going to do now? I say, well, I'm going to race. Maybe not. I say, why, John? Your 2 engines, they have 50 miles left each. So we knew we're not going to go much.
About 20 to about 40 laps in total, isn't it? If that.
I don't know, 50 miles we had left.
Wow.
So eventually broke, and that was it. Before the race, I had to Hayden found a way to fit a I think it's called not the intercooler, but a heat exchanger in the car. that we borrowed from another team. They spent the whole night doing that to cool out the engine a little bit because it could do more than 8 laps or 6 laps or 4 laps or whatever it was. So yeah, it was a quest.
Yeah, I'm sure. But man, my goodness me, what a great tale! I mean, that's amazing. Terrific stuff. I mean, we've got there's a few bits I want to cover. I mean, we'd have to skip over a lot of things, but this is fantastic. But just
we might have to leave for another day because I've got to go soon.
yeah, no problem. Just one thing I want to very quickly bring up, and this probably was just a rumor. Simtech in '94. I heard someone mention there was a rumor that you might be heading there. I don't know if it was just a rumor. Was there any chance of that? Obviously, we know what happened with Simtech in '94 and Roland and everything. Was that ever on the cards?
What year?
94, 93, 94. Was it 94 Simtech, wasn't it? We're on the grid and we all know what happened at Imola, but I heard there was
I don't remember I don't know what happened.
Yeah,
I was in America in '94.
Yeah, because you had gone over to Kart. Anyway, it was just one of those things. That
No, I don't think I was part of it. If I was, I didn't know.
No,
because I was in America trying to find a seat to drive IndyCars.
Yeah,
I had left Europe, gone to America, and I just chased a seat in IndyCars.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's fine. You just
and then I end up finding a seat in Formula One again here in the US with a friend of mine, Carlo Gancia.
Yeah, it was 40 and yeah.
That took me to 40.
Wow. God, there's so much we can cover. There's so much things we can talk about. I mean, I was going to talk about the 500 and IndyCar and all that, but
yeah, we're gonna have to leave it for another time.
No, that's absolutely fine. I was going to think the same thing. I mean, 3.5 hours, it's flown by. But I'm more than happy to schedule a part 2. We can talk about the IndyCar and all that if that's okay.
Sure.
I'd be more than happy to do that. We can be in contact anyway, and we can sort something if that's okay.
All right.
No, that'd be fantastic. I mean, I've just seen that it's almost midnight here in the UK, so
nobody's listening to us anyhow.
No, I know we've got plenty of people tuning in on my little counter. No, it's been great. Loads of people are absolutely loving it. But yeah, I tell you what, I think it's probably good.
Well, what I'm saying is, at midnight, everybody will be asleep in England.
Well, there's quite a few that are still awake, and everyone's saying, "Please come back again." So we can definitely do it.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, we'll be in contact. We'll sort something out soon. That'd be a great thing to do, and we can talk about IndyCar and all that kind of stuff because we've got the 500 coming up soon, which is fantastic. But yeah, no, great stuff. Guys, for those of you who've tuned in, thank you very, very much for tuning in and doing so. Really appreciate all the questions and everything. And obviously, yeah, thank you to you, Roberto, for coming on, having a chat. And we will definitely have to do a part 2. That would be great.
No problem. Another time, a little further down, we'll do that for sure.
We'll get something arranged. Fantastic. Thank you so much for telling us all the insights and all the stories. And
by the way, one thing I would like to put on the record.
Yeah.
Since you're in England, and you cover all kinds of racing, I see a big issue in England in Formula Ford.
Yes.
The age limit for Formula Fords, I think, is 16 years old, minimum age. Formula Fords, it's one of the best ways for drivers to come from karting and get experience in racing.
Yes.
Because of politics or whatever it is, they all have ways of getting into F4 earlier, or whatever you call it, F4 in England. I forgot the name.
Yeah,
GB4, whatever.
Yeah.
The age is less than Formula Fords. So a driver coming from karts, he will spend less in Formula Ford, and he will get a much better driving technique and feel in a car that has no grip.
Yeah.
Done when you sit in a car with a lot of grip, with downforce, that takes away all your driver sensitivity
Feel and
that you get feel in Formula Ford. It's a technique that you learn in Formula Ford, and if you have to wait until you're 16 to drive a Formula Ford, you would go to another series,
yeah,
and you're gonna miss that.
yeah,
So Formula Ford needs to be at least a year younger
yeah. It needs to come
than
down.
whatever GB4 is.
Yeah.
And it's killing Formula Ford for no reason.
Yeah. And it's killing Formula Ford, and it's stopping drivers getting the opportunity to, to get that feel.
More drivers, because it takes less money than, and drivers can't do it because they have to wait until they're 16.
Yeah.
I've sent a driver from the US just to do testing in England now in Formula Ford because he can't go racing. Because I still believe it's the best place for a driver from karting to go to before he drives into a slick tires and wing car.
Yeah. And we just have to look at the names that have come through Formula Ford and they've gone into F1. They've all done it. All the they've all come through. So it needs to happen more.
And
Yeah.
I would like to, if you can, put that out there.
Absolutely.
In the separate note, because I believe Formula Ford deserves to have a place forever in the racing, how you call it, ladder for a driver that comes out of karts.
It should be the next logical step from karts, Formula Ford.
I believe so. I really believe so.
Fully agree. Absolutely.
All it needs to do is, all the officials need to do is find a way that Formula Ford can be 1 year younger than the next step, which has wing and slick tires.
Yeah, and I can't see why that would be such a big issue. I think it would be something fairly easy to put in place. But...
or at least the same age, so people can have the choice to go and race a car that's less expensive.
Yeah.
And maybe they will find out that teaches them more than the one that has more grip.
Yeah, yeah, and they'll probably learn more and be better drivers for it, and it will help move.
I really believe on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And from what I can see in the comments, there's a lot of people agreeing. We'll definitely put something out there about that and say it's endorsed by Roberto Moreno, and they can't ignore it. But no, fantastic. Fully agree. Fully agree. I think that's a great way to end. Thank you so much for coming on, having a chat, and we will do it again soon. We've got a lot more to cover, but it's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
great stuff.
Thank you. Thanks for everybody that's listening to us.
No, it's fitting from you. And thank you to everyone who's tuned in, and we will see you very soon. Good night, all.
Thank you.